Dance with me, and if you don't embarrass yourself too badly, maybe my son will marry you." The words cut through Manhattan's most exclusive charity gala like a knife through silk. 300 of New York's elite turned to watch a billionaire real estate mogul mock a black woman in a cleaning uniform, crystal champagne flute raised in cruel toast. The room held its breath, some in horror, most in anticipation of the humiliation to come. But Lena Brooks didn't flinch, didn't drop her eyes, didn't run. She simply said, "I accept." What happened next would shatter more than just champagne glasses. It would break open secrets, destroy empires, and prove that excellence remembers, even when the world has forgotten. Stay with me until the end of this story. Like this video and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this moment of reckoning travels. The Ashford Hotel ballroom glittered like the inside of a jewelry box. All gold leaf and crystal chandeliers, marble columns rising toward a ceiling painted with cherubs that had never known hunger, never scrubbed floors, never wondered if dignity was a luxury they couldn't afford. The annual Metropolitan Arts Foundation Gala drew Manhattan's power players the way honey draws flies. Except these flies wore Tom Ford and Valentino, their combined net worth exceeding the GDP of small nations. Lena Brooks pushed her cleaning cart along the ballroom's perimeter, her movements practiced and invisible. Years of this work had taught her the art of not being seen, how to empty ashtrays and refresh towel stations while the wealthy pretended she didn't exist, their conversations flowing around her like she was furniture, which, she'd learned, was exactly what they thought she was. "More champagne here." A woman's voice rang out, sharp and entitled. Lena glanced over to see a blonde in a dress that cost more than 6 months of Lena's rent, waving an empty flute like a scepter. "I'll let the servers know, ma'am," Lena said quietly, her voice the practiced neutral of service workers everywhere. The woman didn't even look at her, just turned back to her companion, already mid-sentence about a yacht in the Mediterranean. Lena had been working at the Ashford for 3 years, long enough to know which guests tipped, which ones grabbed, which ones acted like she was a ghost they could see through. Tonight's gala was typical. Excessive flower arrangements that would be thrown away tomorrow, caviar that cost more per ounce than her hourly wage, and speeches about supporting the arts from people who'd never stepped foot in a public theater. She was emptying a trash receptacle near the eastern alcove when she heard the commotion. "No, no, no! This is unacceptable!" The voice boomed across the ballroom, making heads turn. Lena recognized it immediately. Marcus Vanderholt, real estate developer and hotel magnate, whose properties stretched from Manhattan to Miami. He was standing near the main bar, face flushed with anger and alcohol, gesturing wildly at a spilled drink on his tuxedo jacket. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Vanderholt," a young server stammered, her hand shaking as she tried to dab at the stain with a napkin. "It was an accident. An accident?" Vanderholt's voice dripped with contempt. "You people can't do one simple job without screwing it up. What kind of establishment is Ashford running here?" The girl looked like she might cry. She couldn't have been more than 22, 23. Lena felt her jaw tighten. "Sir, please," the server whispered. "I'll get this cleaned." "You'll get yourself fired is what you'll get," Vanderholt snapped. He turned to the crowd that had gathered, playing to his audience. "This is what happens when standards slip, when anyone can get hired to serve at a prestigious event." Lena saw hotel management approaching, saw the girl's career ending before it had really begun, saw the familiar machinery of power crushing someone small and powerless, and something in her chest went tight. She'd seen this scene play out 1,000 times. Usually, she stayed invisible. Usually, she let it happen. Not tonight. "Mr. Vanderholt," Lena's voice was calm as she stepped forward, leaving her cart behind. "I can help with that stain, club soda and salt. It'll come right out." Vanderholt's eyes swung to her, focusing with the particular meanness of a drunk who'd found a new target. "Oh? The maid knows how to clean? How extraordinary!" Laughter rippled through his nearby circle. "What's next? Are you going to teach me how to tie my shoes?" "I'm just offering to help, sir," Lena said evenly. "Help!" Vanderholt swirled his fresh drink, his gaze sliding over Lena with dismissive assessment. "You know what would really help? If you people understood your place. Stick to what you know, pushing brooms and emptying trash. Leave the thinking to those of us who actually built something. The crowd around him was growing. Lena could feel phones coming out, social media vultures sensing drama. She should walk away, should disappear back into invisibility. Every survival instinct she'd honed over 3 years screamed at her to leave. But she thought of that server's shaking hands, thought of every dismissal, every casual cruelty, every moment she'd swallowed her pride and pretended dehumanization was just part of the job. "I understand my place perfectly, Mr. Vanderholt," Lena said quietly. "I'm just not sure you understand yours." The ballroom went silent. You could have heard a diamond earring drop. Vanderholt's face darkened. "Excuse me?" "Your place," Lena repeated, her voice steady despite her hammering heart, "is as a guest in this hotel. These young people are working to provide you service. Respect isn't too much to expect in return." For a moment, Vanderholt just stared at her, his mouth slightly open. Then he laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "Oh, this is rich. The cleaning lady is going to lecture me about respect? Me? Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" "I know exactly who you are, sir." "Then you know I could have you fired with one phone call." He pulled out his cell phone, waving it. "In fact, let me do that right now. Where's Ashford Management? I want this woman removed." "Marcus," a new voice cut through the tension. "What's going on?" Lena turned to see a younger man approaching, late 20s, lean build, expensive suit, but wearing it like he was uncomfortable. His face held Vanderholt's bone structure, but none of his cruelty. This had to be the son, James Vanderholt, whose name appeared on charity boards and arts foundations across the city. "Your timing is perfect, James," Marcus said, throwing an arm around his son's shoulders. "I was just about to teach this woman a lesson about knowing her place." James's eyes flicked to Lena, something unreadable in his expression. "Dad, maybe we should just—" No, I have a better idea." Marcus's eyes gleamed with alcohol and malice. "You're always going on about equality and opportunity and all that liberal nonsense, about giving people chances." He turned back to Lena, a cruel smile spreading. "So, here's a chance. A real chance." Lena's stomach dropped. Nothing good ever came after words like those. "The orchestra is about to start," Marcus continued, gesturing toward the stage where musicians were indeed assembling. "This is an arts gala, after all, so let's have some art." He addressed the crowd now, his voice projecting. "I propose a challenge. This woman seems to think she's my equal, so let's test that. I challenge her to a waltz, a proper Viennese waltz, right here, right now, in front of everyone." Murmurs rippled through the watching crowd. Phones were definitely out now recording. "If she can dance without making a fool of herself," Marcus said, his tone making clear he thought this impossible, "I'll personally donate $50,000 to the Metropolitan Arts Foundation in her name. Hell, I'll even apologize for suggesting she didn't know her place." His smile sharpened. "But when she fails, and she will fail, she gives a public apology for her disrespect and accepts termination from the Ashford with no complaint." "Dad, this is ridiculous," James said quietly. "You can't what? Offer opportunity? Isn't that what you're always saying we should do?" Marcus looked back at Lena. "Well, do you accept, or do you admit I was right about knowing your place?" Every eye in the ballroom was on Lena. She could feel the weight of their stares, their anticipation of her humiliation. Most were already smiling, already savoring the entertainment of watching her stumble through a dance she couldn't possibly know, couldn't possibly execute in her uniform and sensible shoes, her body exhausted from a 10-hour shift. Lena looked at Marcus Vanderholt's triumphant face, looked at the crowd waiting for her shame, looked at James, who was watching her with something that might have been pity. Then she looked at the orchestra, now fully assembled, and something old and buried stirred in her chest, something she'd tried to kill 5 years ago when her world ended, something that apparently refused to die. "I have one condition," Lena said. Marcus blinked, clearly not expecting negotiation. "You're hardly in a position to make demands?" "If I win," Lena continued calmly, "you donate $100,000 to the foundation, and you issue a public apology, not just to me, but to every service worker in this hotel, every person you've ever dismissed as you people." Fine, Marcus waved dismissively. When you lose, though, the terms stand. Public apology, immediate termination, no legal complaint. One more thing, Lena said. I choose the music. Marcus's smile widened. Oh, by all means, choose away. This is your funeral. Lena walked toward the orchestra, feeling 300 pairs of eyes tracking her movement. The conductor, a silver-haired woman named Maestro Chen, looked at her with curiosity tinged with concern. Do you know Khachaturian's masquerade waltz? Lena asked quietly. Maestro Chen's eyebrows rose. That's quite advanced. It's not typical ballroom fare. I know. Can you play it? We can. Chen studied Lena's face. But you should know, it's fast, technically demanding. Even trained dancers find it challenging. Perfect, Lena said. That's exactly what I need. She walked back to the center of the ballroom, where a space was clearing. Hotel management stood frozen at the perimeter, clearly uncertain whether to intervene. Marcus was holding court with his friends, already acting like he'd won. Got your funeral march picked out? He called out. Something like that, Lena replied. Then she did something that made the crowd murmur. She reached down and untied her sensible work shoes, stepping out of them. Her feet, in thin socks, touched the cool marble floor. She straightened, rolling her shoulders back. Last chance to back out, Marcus said, moving into position. I'd almost feel bad about this if you weren't so uppity. Lena met his eyes. I don't think you've ever felt bad about anything in your life, Mr. Vanderholt. His face darkened, but before he could respond, Maestro Chen raised her baton. The opening notes of the masquerade waltz began, tentative at first, then building. Marcus reached for Lena with the confidence of a man who'd taken ballroom lessons, who attended events where dancing was expected, who'd never once questioned his right to lead. He had no idea what was about to happen. The moment Lena's hand touched his shoulder, the moment his hand found her back, something shifted in her body. Muscle memory 5 years dormant roared back to life. The music swelled, fast and complex, and Lena moved. Not like someone who'd learned to waltz at cotillion or dance class, like someone who'd lived in music, who'd trained 8 hours a day, who'd performed on stages across 3 continents before she was 20. Marcus stumbled immediately, unprepared for the speed, the precision. Lena compensated, her movement so controlled he couldn't tell she was leading, couldn't tell he was being carried through steps he didn't know. But the crowd could tell. They could see the difference between his clumsy basic step and her liquid grace. She spun away from him in a movement that shouldn't have been part of a waltz, but somehow fit perfectly, her body remembering choreography from another life. Her uniform skirt flared. Her sock-clad feet moved across marble like they were made for it, each step placed with impossible precision. Marcus tried to regain control, to force the dance back to something he understood, but it was like trying to contain mercury. Lena was everywhere and nowhere, moving through the music like water, like light, like something that had been compressed for so long it was now exploding into its natural form. The ballroom was utterly silent except for the orchestra. Even they were watching now, even while they played, because what was happening on the floor was clearly not amateur hour. Lena's eyes were closed. She was back on stage in Paris, in London, in Moscow, back before the accident, back before everything broke. The music was Khachaturian, but she was dancing Giselle, Swan Lake, Sleeping Beauty. Every ballet she'd ever performed, every piece of her soul she'd poured into movement, all of it flooding back. She opened her eyes and found she'd left Marcus behind entirely. He'd stopped trying to keep up, was standing frozen in the middle of the floor while she danced circles around him. Literally. Her turns were textbook perfect, her extensions clean, her musicality so precise she was hitting accents in the score that most dancers would miss. The crowd began to applaud before the music ended. Started with one person, then spread like wildfire. By the time Maestro Chen brought the orchestra to the final crescendo, the entire ballroom was on its feet. Lena came to a perfect fifth position on the final note, her breathing elevated but controlled, her posture impeccable. For a moment she stood in the center of the floor, the last echo of music hanging in the air, and let herself remember who she'd been, who she'd buried, who she'd tried so hard to forget. Then reality crashed back. The applause was thunderous, but she could see faces in the crowd. Shock, confusion, recognition starting to dawn in some eyes. Marcus Vanderholt stood 5 feet away, his face cycling through emotions, shock, humiliation, rage. His expensive tuxedo jacket was rumpled from their brief contact, his carefully styled hair slightly mussed. He looked like a man who'd just been publicly embarrassed, which was exactly what had happened. "What the hell was that?" His voice was low, dangerous. Before Lena could answer, a new voice cut through the noise. "Lena Brooks!" Lena turned to see a tall black man in hotel security uniform stepping forward. Marcus Washington, head of Ashford Security. They'd exchanged maybe 10 words in 3 years, but the way he was looking at her now suggested those words were about to change. "I thought I recognized you," Marcus Washington said quietly, moving closer. "But it seemed impossible. Lena Brooks doesn't clean hotels. Lena Brooks is dead." The applause was dying now, replaced by confused murmurs. Phones were still out, still recording. This moment was being captured from a dozen angles, would be on social media within minutes. "I'm sorry." James Vanderholt stepped forward, his voice genuinely confused. "Does someone want to explain what just happened? Who is Lena Brooks?" Marcus Washington looked at Lena, a question in his eyes. She nodded once. Permission. Because the truth was coming out anyway, had been coming out from the moment she'd accepted this insane challenge. "Lena Brooks," Washington said to the crowd, was one of the most promising ballet dancers of her generation. Youngest principal dancer in the American Ballet Theater's history. Performed for presidents and royalty. Won the Prix de Lausanne when she was 17. She was being called the next Misty Copeland, the dancer who would change everything. He paused, looking at Lena with something like sadness. And then 5 years ago, during a performance of Giselle at Lincoln Center, there was an accident. Stage equipment failure. She fell 20 feet, shattered her left leg in 7 places, broke her back in 2. Doctors said she'd never walk normally again, let alone dance. The ballroom had gone completely silent now, all eyes on Lena. "The company dropped her contract while she was still in the hospital," Washington continued. "Insurance covered the surgeries, but not the years of physical therapy. She had no family, no safety net. The arts world moved on, forgot about her. Last I heard, there was a rumor she'd died. Suicide, they said, because she couldn't face a life without dance." "Clearly, that rumor was wrong," Lena said quietly. Her voice felt strange in her throat. She hadn't talked about this in 5 years. Hadn't let herself think about it. "I didn't die. I just started over." Marcus Vanderholt's face had gone pale. She could see him calculating, understanding that this wasn't just some maid he'd humiliated. This was someone with a story, with a past, with witnesses who would remember. This was someone who'd just made him look like a fool in front of everyone who mattered in Manhattan. "You lied," he said, grasping at anything. "You pretended to be just a cleaning woman when you're actually—" "I am a cleaning woman," Lena cut him off. "I clean hotel rooms. I empty trash. I scrub floors. That's not pretending. That's surviving." She looked around at the crowd. "The ballet world forgot I existed. I had medical bills and no income. The Ashford hired me when nobody else would. I'm grateful for this job, grateful for the dignity of honest work." But you hustled me," Marcus insisted. "This was a setup. You knew you could dance and you let me—" "You challenged me," Lena said flatly. "I accepted. Those were your terms, not mine. The terms were for a waltz, a simple ballroom waltz, not whatever that was." Marcus was almost shouting now. "That wasn't fair." "You never specified the style," James said quietly, his eyes on Lena with something that might have been awe. "You just said waltz. She delivered a waltz. That it was beyond your ability isn't her fault." "Shut up, James." Marcus wheeled on his son. "You think this is funny? Think this is justice? This woman made me look like a fool." "You made yourself look like a fool the moment you decided public humiliation was entertainment," James shot back. "She just gave you exactly what you asked for." Father and son stared at each other, years of tension crackling between them. Then Marcus turned back to Lena, his voice dropping to something cold and vicious. "You think you've won something here? You think one dance changes anything?" He gestured around the ballroom. "Tomorrow you'll still be cleaning toilets, and I'll still own half of Manhattan. This little moment of glory, It's nothing. You're nothing. You always were nothing, which is why you ended up here in the first place. The words should have hurt. 5 years ago, they would have destroyed her. But Lena had spent 5 years learning that survival was its own kind of strength, that making it through each day when your dreams were dead required more courage than performing for presidents ever had. You're right, she said calmly. Tomorrow I'll still be cleaning, and you'll still be the man who was so threatened by a woman in a uniform that you tried to publicly humiliate her for sport. She smiled, and it wasn't nice. The only difference is, now everyone here knows it. Now it's on camera. Now there's proof. Marcus's hand twitched toward his phone, toward power, toward the mechanism he'd always used to make problems disappear. But before he could move, Maestro Chen's voice rang out. Mr. Vanderholt. The conductor stepped down from the podium, her eyes blazing. You made a wager. Terms were clear. If Ms. Brooks danced without embarrassing herself, you would donate $100,000 to the Metropolitan Arts Foundation and issue a public apology. That wasn't, she cheated. I'm not. The whole thing is on video, someone in the crowd called out. Multiple videos, already uploading. Marcus looked around wildly, seeing phones everywhere, seeing his humiliation being documented and shared and immortalized. His face went from pale to red to purple. You want your $100,000? He snarled at Maestro Chen. Fine. You want an apology? Fine. I'm sorry. I'm sorry this woman is a liar and a con artist. I'm sorry the Ashford hired someone who clearly doesn't know her place. I'm sorry that's not an apology, Lena said quietly. But it doesn't matter. You can keep your money. I don't want it. That stopped Marcus mid-rant. What? I don't want your money, Lena repeated. And I don't want your apology, because neither one means anything. You're only offering them because you were caught, because there are cameras, because for once you can't make consequences disappear. She looked at him with something approaching pity. Keep your $100,000. Use it to buy better PR when this goes viral. She turned to Maestro Chen. But if the foundation would like to put my name forward for anything, if there are young dancers who need scholarships, opportunities, support, I'd be happy to help with that. Not with money I don't have, but with time, with teaching, with showing them that a career ending isn't the same as a life ending. Maestro Chen's eyes softened. I think we can arrange that, Ms. Brooks. Lena nodded, then turned toward the ballroom exit. She needed to get out of here, needed air, needed to process what had just happened. Her feet were starting to hurt. 5 years of minimal dancing meant muscles had atrophied, flexibility had diminished. She'd pay for tonight's performance tomorrow in ways these people couldn't imagine. Wait, James Vanderholt's voice stopped her. He moved forward, away from his father, his face earnest. Ms. Brooks, what you just did, what you survived, that's extraordinary. And my father's behavior is inexcusable. I want you to know that not all of us, he gestured vaguely at the crowd, not all of us see the world the way he does. Lena studied him. He seemed genuine, seemed troubled by what he'd witnessed. But genuine wealthy people were still wealthy people, still living in a world so different from hers, they might as well be different species. Thank you, Mr. Vanderholt, she said neutrally. If you'll excuse me, I have a shift to finish. She walked toward the exit, her cleaning cart abandoned somewhere in the crowd. She'd deal with that tomorrow. Right now, she just needed to get to the employee locker room, needed to let herself shake, needed to let herself feel everything she'd been suppressing. But as she reached the ballroom doors, Marcus Vanderholt's voice rang out one more time, loud and vicious. This isn't over. You think you can embarrass me and just walk away? I own this hotel. I'll make sure you never work in this city again. I'll destroy you. Lena paused, her hand on the door. She didn't turn around, just spoke over her shoulder, her voice carrying across the silent ballroom. Mr. Vanderholt, I've already been destroyed. I survived it. The question is, can you? Then she pushed through the doors and disappeared into the corridor beyond, leaving behind a ballroom full of shocked faces, camera phones, and one very angry billionaire who'd just learned that power has limits. And somewhere in that crowd, James Vanderholt watched her go with an expression of growing resolve. But also in that crowd, in corners and shadows, other people were watching too. People with their own agendas, their own calculations, their own understanding that what had just happened wasn't an ending. It was an opening move in a game where the stakes were higher than anyone yet realized. The employee locker room smelled like industrial cleaner and old coffee. Lena sat on the wooden bench, still in her uniform, her bare feet pressed against cold tile. Her hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading, now that she was alone with what she'd just done. 5 years. 5 years of staying invisible, of keeping her head down, of pretending that part of her life had never existed, gone in one impulsive decision to accept a drunk billionaire's challenge. The door swung open and Lena looked up to see Maria Gonzalez, another housekeeper on the night shift, rushing in with wide eyes. "Lena, oh my God, everyone's talking about it. There's videos everywhere. You're all over Twitter already." Maria thrust her phone forward, showing a clip of Lena spinning across the ballroom floor. The view count was climbing even as they watched. "Why didn't you tell anyone you could dance like that?" "Because I can't anymore," Lena said quietly. "What you saw tonight, that was muscle memory. Borrowed time. Tomorrow my body will remind me why I stopped." "But you were amazing. People are saying—" Maria scrolled through comments, her eyes scanning quickly. "They're saying Marcus Vanderholt is a monster for how he treated you. They're digging up other stories about him, other people he's humiliated. This is blowing up, Lena. This is really blowing up." Lena's stomach clenched. She'd known there would be videos, had seen the phones recording, but she hadn't fully processed what that meant. In 2024, viral moments didn't just spread, they consumed. They took on lives of their own, became narratives that the people involved couldn't control. "I need to get out of here," Lena said, standing up. Her legs protested, muscles already tightening. She'd pay for tonight for days. "Before someone from management comes looking." "Too late for that," a new voice said from the doorway. Lena turned to see Patricia Chen, the Ashford's general manager, standing with her arms crossed. Patricia was a slim woman in her 50s who'd worked her way up from front desk to management over 20 years. Her expression was unreadable. "Ms. Brooks, my office. Now?" Maria shot Lena a worried look as she followed Patricia out of the locker room, down the employee corridor with its fluorescent lights and motivational posters about customer service. Patricia's office was small but organized, every surface neat, every paper filed. She gestured for Lena to sit, then closed the door. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Patricia asked, moving behind her desk. "I accepted a challenge," Lena said carefully. "Those were Mr. Vanderholt's terms, not mine. Marcus Vanderholt is one of our biggest investors. He owns 12% of this hotel. He's been a patron of the Ashford chain for 30 years. Patricia leaned forward. "And you just humiliated him in front of 300 of the city's most influential people." "He humiliated himself. I just danced." "You did more than dance, Lena. You performed. You revealed a whole history that raises questions I now have to answer. Why is a former principal ballet dancer working as a housekeeper? Why didn't this come up in your background check? Why were you hiding it?" "I wasn't hiding anything," Lena said, keeping her voice level. "You asked if I had housekeeping experience. I did. I'd been cleaning offices for 6 months before I applied here. You asked if I was reliable. I showed up on time every day for 3 years. I didn't lie about anything. I just didn't volunteer information that wasn't relevant to my job." Patricia was quiet for a moment, studying Lena's face. "Vanderholt called me 15 minutes ago. He wants you fired immediately. He's threatening to pull his investment if we don't comply." There it was. The consequence Lena had known was coming. Power always won in the end. Marcus Vanderholt could lose a dance, could lose face, but he'd never lose control. Men like him always found a way to make the world bend to their will. "I understand," Lena said quietly. "I'll clear out my locker." "I haven't finished." Patricia's voice was sharp. "Vanderholt wants you fired, but in the last 20 minutes, our corporate office has received over 200 calls and emails. From guests, from staff, from people who saw the videos online. About half are complaining about Vanderholt's behavior. The other half are praising how you handled yourself. Our social media is exploding. The Ashford hashtag is trending on 3 platforms. Lena blinked. "I don't understand." "Neither do I, entirely. But what I do understand is that this hotel chain survives on reputation. And right now, the narrative developing online is that we employ extraordinary people who deserve respect, and that Marcus Vanderholt is a bully who got what he deserved. Patricia leaned back in her chair. Corporate is analyzing the situation. They're trying to determine which position, firing you or defending you, will do less damage to the brand. So my job depends on social media metrics, Lena said flatly. Your job depends on a cost-benefit analysis, same as everything in this world. Patricia's tone wasn't cruel, just honest. I'm sorry if that sounds harsh, but Vanderholt can hurt us financially. Bad publicity can also hurt us financially. We're trying to figure out which hurts less. What do you think I should do? Patricia was quiet for a long moment. Off the record? I think you should go home, ice whatever muscles you damaged tonight, and wait. Don't talk to media. Don't post on social media. Don't engage. Let the story develop without adding fuel. Corporate will make a decision by morning. And on the record? On the record, you're suspended pending investigation. Paid leave. Come back Monday for a decision. Patricia stood, signaling the end of the conversation. For what it's worth, Lena, what you did tonight took courage. But courage doesn't always pay the bills. Lena left the office and headed for the employee exit, wanting to avoid the main lobby. But as she pushed through the service door into the alley behind the hotel, she found she wasn't alone. James Vanderholt was leaning against the brick wall, still in his tuxedo, looking uncomfortable and out of place in the grimy alley. Ms. Brooks, he said, straightening, I was hoping to catch you. How did you know I'd come out this way? I didn't. I've been checking all the exits for the last half hour. He moved closer, his face earnest in the yellow light from the security lamp. I needed to apologize properly. Not in front of a crowd, not as performance. What my father did tonight was unconscionable. What he's doing now, trying to get you fired, is worse. He's protecting himself, Lena said. It's what powerful people do. It's what cowards do. James's voice was bitter. My whole life I've watched him treat people like disposable props in his personal theater. Staff, employees, anyone he considers beneath him, they're just scenery to him. And I've been too afraid to really confront it because confronting him means confronting everything. The money, the name, the empire built on crushing people like you. Why are you telling me this? Because I want to help. I want to do something that actually matters instead of just serving on charity boards and pretending I'm different from him while living off his money. James pulled out a business card, held it out. This is my personal number. If you need legal help, financial support, character witnesses, anything, please call me. I mean it. Lena looked at the card but didn't take it. Mr. Vanderholt, I appreciate the sentiment, but help from you comes with complications I don't need. Your father already thinks this was some kind of setup. If you get involved, it'll just confirm his paranoia and make things worse. He's already making things worse. He's got his lawyers drafting papers, his PR team spinning stories. He's going to try to destroy your reputation, claim you staged this whole thing, claim you're trying to extort him. I know how he operates. Then you know that me being connected to you in any way will just give him ammunition. The narrative becomes gold digger scheming with sympathetic son. You see how that plays out? James's face fell because he did see. I hate this. I hate that you're right. I hate that trying to help you could hurt you. Then help differently, Lena said. Your father donates to arts organizations. He sits on boards. He has influence in places that could actually support dancers, could create scholarships, could prevent other people from ending up like me. Use your position there. Make noise there. Don't make this about me specifically. Make it about systemic change. She could see him processing this, see the wheels turning. He was young enough to still think individual actions could shift entire systems, naive enough to believe his father might listen to reason. She remembered being that young, that hopeful, before the fall that taught her how fragile everything really was. I'll try, James said finally, but please, take the card anyway, just in case. This time Lena accepted it, tucking it into her uniform pocket. Thank you. Now go back to the gala before people start speculating about why you followed the help into an alley. He winced at the phrasing but nodded, turning back toward the hotel entrance. Lena waited until he disappeared, then started the walk to the subway station 6 blocks away. Her feet were screaming now, the temporary numbness of adrenaline completely gone. Every step reminded her why she'd stopped dancing, why physical therapy had only gone so far, why the doctor's prognosis had been right even though she'd refused to believe it at the time. Her phone buzzed, then buzzed again, and again. She pulled it out to find dozens of notifications, friend requests, messages from strangers, tags and posts she hadn't made. The videos were multiplying, mutating. Someone had found old footage of her dancing with ABT, had created a side-by-side comparison. Someone else had started a hashtag. Lena Brooks rises. There were think pieces already being drafted. She could tell from the journalist requests flooding her DMs. Lena silenced the phone and kept walking. The subway platform was nearly empty at this hour, just a few other night shift workers heading home. Lena found a bench and sat carefully, every muscle protesting. Across the platform, a young woman was staring at her phone, then looking up at Lena, then back at her phone. Recognition dawning. The girl stood, started to cross the platform, and Lena's whole body tensed. But before the girl could reach her, an older man in a maintenance uniform touched her arm, shook his head, protecting Lena's space. The girl hesitated, then nodded, staying back. But she smiled at Lena, gave a small thumbs up. Lena's eyes burned. She looked away, blinking hard. The train arrived and she found a corner seat, pressing her forehead against the cool window as the car lurched into motion. Above her reflection in the dark glass, an advertisement promised that dreams could come true with hard work and determination. Lena almost laughed. She'd had the hard work and determination. She'd been the dream come true. And then physics and bad luck had ended it all in the time it took to fall 20 feet. Her apartment in Washington Heights was tiny, a studio that cost too much but was all she could afford. She climbed the 4 flights slowly, her legs burning, and let herself into the familiar cramped space. Everything she owned fit here. A futon, a small table, a kitchenette, a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. On one wall, pushed into the corner, was the only remnant of her old life. A bar she'd installed herself, that she used for physical therapy stretches when the pain got bad enough that she couldn't sleep. Lena changed out of her uniform, ran a bath as hot as she could stand, and lowered herself into the water with a gasp. The heat was agony and relief simultaneously, muscles protesting and loosening. She closed her eyes and let herself float, let herself remember. The stage at Lincoln Center, the weight of the costume, hand-sewn and perfect, the rosin on her point shoes, the familiar tightness of her bun, the sound of the orchestra tuning, the feeling of being exactly where she was meant to be, doing exactly what she was born to do, the certainty that this was her life, her future, her forever. And then the crack, the weightlessness, the impact that shattered everything. Lena opened her eyes, staring at the water-stained ceiling. She'd spent 5 years running from that memory, building a new life from nothing, learning to define herself by survival instead of achievement. And tonight she'd thrown it all away for what? Pride? Anger? The chance to prove she was still somebody? Her phone was buzzing again from the other room. She ignored it, sinking deeper into the bath until the water covered her ears and the world went quiet. But the world didn't stay quiet for long. The next morning, Lena woke to someone pounding on her door. She checked her phone, 7:23 a.m., dozens more notifications, and a text from Patricia Chen. Do not talk to anyone until you hear from me, under any circumstances. The pounding continued. Ms. Brooks, we know you're in there. Just a few questions. Lena looked through the peephole to see a man with a camera and a woman with a microphone. News crews. They'd found her address. How did you feel when Marcus Vanderholt challenged you? The woman called through the door. What made you decide to accept? Do you plan to pursue legal action? Lena backed away from the door, her heart racing. This was escalating faster than she'd imagined possible. She'd thought viral meant a day or two of attention, some angry comments, maybe an apology extracted under pressure. She hadn't thought about news crews, about her private life being invaded, about the story taking on proportions beyond her control. She grabbed her phone and called the one person she knew who understood this world. Maestro Chen answered on the second ring. Lena, I was hoping you'd call. There are reporters outside my apartment, Lena said without preamble. This is getting out of hand. It's been out of hand since midnight. The videos have over 15 million combined views. Marcus Vanderholt held a press conference at 6 a.m. claiming you staged the entire incident to extort him, that you're a failed dancer looking for a payday, that he's the victim of a coordinated setup. Chen's voice was grim. His PR team is very good. They're controlling the narrative. What narrative? I just danced. That's all I did. You embarrassed a very powerful man. In his world, that's equivalent to assault. He's going to come at you with everything he has, Lena. Lawyers, investigators, media manipulation. Are you prepared for that? Lena looked around her tiny apartment, thought about her 3 years of paychecks, her lack of savings, her complete absence of resources to fight someone like Marcus Vanderholt. No, I'm not prepared. I don't have the money for lawyers. I don't have connections or influence. I just wanted to get through my shift. Then you need allies, people who can stand with you, who can provide support. Chen paused. The Metropolitan Arts Foundation wants to help. We're issuing a statement defending you, highlighting your career and what happened to you. We're also setting up a legal fund if you need representation. Why? Lena asked bluntly. Why would you do that for me? Because what Vanderholt did to you, what he does to everyone he considers beneath him, is exactly the kind of behavior that destroys arts communities. He sits on our board. He influences funding decisions. He's blocked grants for artists he doesn't like, killed programs that didn't serve his interests. We've been afraid to confront him because we need his money. Chen's voice hardened. But you weren't afraid, and that matters. Before Lena could respond, there was a different kind of knocking on her door, authoritative, official. Ms. Brooks, building management, we need to speak with you about the media presence in the building. Lena ended the calls with Chen and opened the door to find her superintendent, Mr. Kowalski, looking apologetic and stressed. I'm sorry, Ms. Brooks, but the other tenants are complaining. There are 3 news vans outside, reporters in the lobby. It's disrupting everyone. The landlord is concerned about liability, Lena finished. I understand. I'll leave. You don't have to leave permanently, Kowalski said quickly, just until this dies down. Maybe stay with family for a few days? Lena didn't bother explaining she had no family. I'll figure something out. She packed a duffel bag with basics, clothes, toiletries, her laptop, chargers, stood in her apartment looking at the life she'd built from wreckage, wondering if she was about to lose it all over again. Then she called the one number she had for help, even though every instinct told her it was a mistake. James Vanderholt answered immediately. Ms. Brooks? You said if I needed help. I need help. 20 minutes later, a car pulled up to the service entrance of her building. Not James himself, but a driver, professional and discreet. He got her out of the building without encountering the news crews, drove her to a hotel in Midtown. Nice, but not ostentatious, the kind of place business travelers used. Mr. Vanderholt has arranged a room for you, the driver said, registered under a different name. He says to stay as long as you need, order room service, and he'll check in later today. Lena wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain her independence, her pride, her complete separation from the Vanderholt family drama. But she also needed a safe place to regroup, to figure out her next move, to avoid making decisions while exhausted and overwhelmed. The room was on the 12th floor, clean and anonymous. Lena locked the door behind her, drew the curtains, and finally let herself check the full scope of what was happening online. The videos had spawned articles. The articles had spawned commentary. The commentary had spawned investigations. People were digging into Marcus Vanderholt's history, finding patterns. A former employee came forward about discrimination. Another talked about harassment. A third described retaliation. Years of buried stories were surfacing, connected now by Lena's moment in the spotlight. But there were also attacks on Lena. Vanderholt's PR team was earning its money. Stories questioning her motives, her background, her character. Anonymous sources claiming she'd always been difficult, unstable, looking for attention. Suggestions that her accident hadn't been an accident at all, but a suicide attempt she'd later reframed. Speculation about her mental health, her finances, her relationships. Lena felt sick. This was what happened when you stepped into the light, when you challenged power. The machine turned on you, ground you down, made you regret ever thinking you mattered. Her phone rang. Patricia Chen from Ashford. Lena, I have news. Corporate has made a decision. Patricia sounded tired. They're terminating your employment effective immediately. Lena had been expecting this, but hearing it still felt like a punch to the gut. Because of Vanderholt. Because the situation has become untenable. The media attention, the disruption, the liability concerns. They feel it's best for everyone if we part ways. Patricia paused. Off the record, I think this is cowardly. I think we're caving to pressure from a bully, but I don't make the final decisions. I understand. Thank you for telling me directly. There's a severance package. 3 months' pay. It's more than required, less than deserved. And Lena, I'm sorry, truly. After the call ended, Lena sat on the hotel bed, staring at nothing. Fired. After 3 years of showing up on time, doing good work, never complaining. All gone because she had had the audacity to dance well, to not be humiliated on command, to suggest that maybe she deserved respect. A knock on the door made her jump. She looked through the peephole to see James Vanderholt, alone, looking nervous. She opened the door. Your father got me fired. I know, I just heard. I'm so sorry. James stepped inside when she gestured. He's not going to stop there. He's filed a civil suit against you. Harassment, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress. It's all bullshit, but it'll be expensive to fight. How expensive? Tens of thousands in legal fees, minimum. He's betting you can't afford it, that you'll give up or settle. Lena laughed bitterly. He's right, I can't. I just lost my job and my apartment is about to get complicated. I have maybe $4,000 in savings. How exactly am I supposed to fight a billionaire's legal team? The Metropolitan Arts Foundation has lawyers. Maestro Chen told me they're offering support, and I have lawyers too, my own, separate from my father. People I trust who hate what he's doing. Why? Lena demanded. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. We met 12 hours ago. Why are you risking your relationship with your father, your inheritance, your whole life for someone who's basically a stranger? James was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was raw. Because when I was 16, I watched my father destroy someone. A business partner who disagreed with him publicly. Dad used every resource he had, legal, financial, social. He ruined the man completely. Bankruptcy, divorce, blacklisting, and the whole time Dad smiled, called it justice, called it what happens when people forget their place. He looked at Lena with haunted eyes. That man killed himself 2 years later, and I did nothing. I was a kid, I told myself. It wasn't my fault. But I knew what Dad was, what he was capable of, and I still let myself benefit from his money, his name, his power. I've been complicit my whole adult life. So I'm your redemption arc, Lena said flatly. Your chance to feel better about yourself. Maybe. Probably. James didn't flinch from the accusation. But does it matter? If the help is real, if the support actually makes a difference, does my motivation change the outcome? Lena wanted to say yes, wanted to reject help that came from guilt and privilege and the luxury of choosing to be moral, but she also needed to be practical, needed to survive. And survival sometimes meant accepting imperfect allies in imperfect circumstances. What exactly are you offering? She asked. Legal representation, protection from further media harassment, financial support if you need it, not as charity, but as investment in fighting back. And access to the Foundation's resources for whatever comes next, whether that's teaching or choreography or something else entirely. James pulled out a folder from his bag. This is a contract. It lays out everything, makes it formal and clear. You're not obligated to me personally. Everything goes through proper channels. Lena took the folder, flipped through pages of legal language. It looked legitimate. Looked like James had actually thought this through rather than just showing up with vague promises. I need time to review this, to think. Of course, take all the time you need. James moved toward the door, then hesitated. For what it's worth, Ms. Brooks, last night, watching you dance, seeing you stand up to my father, that was the first time in years I felt like maybe the world could be different, like maybe courage actually mattered. Thank you for that. After he left, Lena returned to the bed, her body aching, her mind spinning. 24 hours ago, she'd been nobody, invisible, safe in her anonymity. Now she was at the center of a media storm, unemployed, facing lawsuits from a billionaire and being offered help from that billionaire's guilt-ridden son. She thought about calling her old therapist, the one who'd helped her through the darkest months after the accident. But therapy cost money she didn't have, And besides, what would she even say? That she'd destroyed her carefully rebuilt life for the satisfaction of one perfect performance? That she'd proven she could still dance but lost everything else in the process? Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Marcus Washington, Ashford Security. I have information you need to hear. Can we meet somewhere private?" Lena stared at the message. The security chief who'd recognized her, who'd told her story to the ballroom. What could he possibly want now? She texted back an address, a coffee shop in Brooklyn she knew had quiet corners and no cameras. Then she lay back on the hotel bed staring at the ceiling and wondered how much deeper into chaos this situation could possibly go. She was about to find out. The coffee shop Marcus Washington had suggested was called The Grind, tucked between a laundromat and a bodega in Bed-Stuy. Lena arrived early, choosing a corner table where she could watch the door. Her body was paying the full price now for last night's performance. Every muscle screamed. Her left leg throbbed with the familiar deep ache that meant the old fractures were protesting, and her back felt like someone had driven nails into her spine. She'd taken enough ibuprofen to worry about her liver, but it barely touched the pain. Marcus Washington arrived exactly on time, scanning the room with professional efficiency before spotting her. He was in civilian clothes now, jeans and a sweater, but still carried himself with that alert stillness of someone trained to notice everything. He ordered coffee at the counter, then slid into the seat across from Lena. "Thank you for meeting me," he said without preamble. "I know you have no reason to trust me." "You told my story to 300 strangers," Lena said flatly, "without asking permission. So no, I don't particularly trust you." "I know, and I apologize for that. I should have asked you first, should have given you the choice." Washington wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. "But I also knew what was happening, knew Vanderholt was setting you up for public humiliation, and I thought if people understood who you really were, it might change the dynamic." "Did it?" "Honestly, I don't know. Maybe it made things worse. Maybe if I'd stayed quiet, Vanderholt would have just let it go after you danced. But once your history came out, once people started digging, it became something bigger than one rich man's ego." He met her eyes. "I'm not here to justify what I did. I'm here to tell you what I know." "Which is?" Washington pulled out his phone, scrolled through something, then turned it to face her. It showed security camera footage, black and white, time-stamped from last night. The angle was from above, looking down at a hotel corridor. Lena watched herself push her cleaning cart along the hallway, watched a door open, watched a figure step out. "That's the service corridor outside the ballroom," Washington said, 3 hours before the gala started. On the screen, the figure approached Lena. The resolution wasn't great, but Lena recognized him. Derek Mills, Marcus Vanderholt's personal assistant, a nervous man in his 30s who always looked like he was bracing for impact. "I don't remember this," Lena said slowly. "He intercepted you while you were setting up the cleaning stations. Talked to you for about 90 seconds. Washington stopped the video, zoomed in. Derek Mills was holding something, showing it to Lena on his phone. "Can you remember what he said?" Lena closed her eyes, reaching back. Yesterday felt like a lifetime ago. Setting up carts, checking supply closets, the usual pre-event rush. And yes, Derek Mills stopping her, asking something. "He asked if I knew how to waltz," Lena said slowly, the memory crystallizing. "Said Mr. Vanderholt sometimes liked to dance with staff at events, that it was tradition or something. Asked if I'd be comfortable if he asked me. I said I knew basic steps but wasn't very good. He thanked me and left." "He was scouting," Washington said grimly. "Setting you up. Vanderholt doesn't have a tradition of dancing with staff. I've worked events for him for 8 years, never seen it once. Mills was gathering information so Vanderholt would know exactly how to structure his challenge to guarantee your humiliation." The coffee in Lena's stomach turned sour. "You're saying this was premeditated? That he planned to humiliate someone before the event even started?" "I'm saying Marcus Vanderholt is a sadist who gets off on making people feel small, and his staff enables it because that's how they keep their jobs." Washington pulled up another video. This is from the ballroom, 40 minutes before guests arrived. The footage showed Vanderholt and Mills standing near the bar, drinks already in hand. No audio, but their body language was clear. Vanderholt gesturing, Mills nodding, both of them laughing. Then Mills pulled out his phone, showed Vanderholt something. More laughter. He was showing him your response, Lena said. Showing him I was an easy target. Exactly, and there's more. Washington swiped to a third video. This is from earlier this week. The timestamp showed 3 days ago. Same hotel, different location, looked like an executive meeting room. Vanderholt was seated at a conference table with several other men Lena didn't recognize. One of them was gesturing animatedly, clearly upset about something. Vanderholt's face was cold, calculating. Then he made a throat-cutting gesture, and the other men laughed. That's Victor Torres, Washington said, head of housekeeping at the Ashford. He was fired the next day, no explanation, no severance, escorted out by security. 22 years with the company, gone in 10 minutes. What did he do? He pushed back on Vanderholt's demand to cut housekeeping staff by 30%, said it would compromise service standards, would put too much pressure on remaining workers. Vanderholt didn't like being contradicted. Washington's jaw tightened. Torres has 3 kids in college, a mortgage, medical bills for his wife, and now he's unemployed because he had the audacity to do his job properly. Lena looked at the frozen image of Vanderholt's cruel smile. Why are you showing me this? Because you're not the first person he's destroyed, and you won't be the last. Because I've been documenting his behavior for 18 months, collecting evidence, and I haven't known what to do with it. Washington leaned forward. I'm head of security. I see everything, hear everything. I know about the harassment complaints that get buried, the discrimination suits that get settled with NDAs, the employees who get blacklisted across the entire hospitality industry because they complained about unsafe conditions or wage theft or sexual misconduct. Then go to the authorities, go to the press. I've tried. Reporters won't touch it without victims willing to go on record, and everyone's too afraid. The few people brave enough to complain get crushed so thoroughly that others learn to stay silent. Vanderholt has layers of protection, lawyers, fixers, connections in city government and police departments. He's untouchable. Washington's voice dropped. Until now. Until you. I didn't expose him. I just danced. You did more than that. You refused to be broken. You showed that he's not invincible, that his power has limits. And now people are paying attention. Real attention. Journalists are digging, victims are reconsidering whether to stay silent, and for the first time in years, Marcus Vanderholt is actually worried. Lena's head was spinning. She'd thought last night was an isolated incident, one drunk billionaire, one impulsive challenge, one moment of defiance. But Washington was describing something systemic, a pattern of abuse enabled by institutions and enforced by fear. What do you want from me? She asked. I want you to fight, not just for yourself, but for everyone he's hurt. I want you to let me give this evidence to your lawyers, to the Metropolitan Arts Foundation, to journalists who will actually investigate. Washington pulled a thumb drive from his pocket, set it on the table between them. 18 months of documentation, video, audio, emails I wasn't supposed to see. Enough to show a pattern of behavior that goes way beyond one bad night. Lena stared at the small device. It looked so innocuous, just a piece of plastic and circuitry. But she understood what it represented, ammunition in a war she'd never asked to fight, evidence that would make her even more of a target, a commitment to a battle that could consume what was left of her life. If I take this, if I use it, Vanderholt will destroy me, she said quietly. He'll throw every resource he has at discrediting me, burying me, making sure I never work again. I'm already fired, already facing lawsuits, already being torn apart online. How much worse can it get? A lot worse, Washington said honestly. He'll go after your credibility, your mental health, your past. He'll find every mistake you've ever made and amplify it. He'll make you wish you'd never met him. He paused. But he'll do most of that anyway. The only question is whether you go down fighting or go down quietly. Easy for you to say. You still have a job. For now. But once he realizes I'm the leak, once he figures out I gave you this evidence, I'm done too. I'm making the same calculation you are. Is standing up worth the cost? Washington met her eyes. I think it is. I think some things matter more than safety. Lena's phone buzzed. A text from James Vanderholt. My lawyers are ready whenever you are. No pressure. But the sooner we respond to my father's suit, the better our position. Another text came through, this one from Maestro Chen. Press conference scheduled for tomorrow at the foundation. We're announcing the scholarship fund in your name. Hope you'll join us. A third text from a number she didn't recognize. This is Amanda Reeves, New York Times. I'm writing a feature about Marcus Vanderholt's business practices and treatment of employees. Would love to talk. Your voice matters. The world was demanding she choose. Stay small and hope to survive, or step forward and risk everything. Lena thought about the young server who'd spilled a drink, who'd almost been fired for an accident. Thought about Victor Torres and his 3 kids and 22 years of loyalty tossed aside like garbage. Thought about every person who'd ever been told to know their place, to accept cruelty as the price of survival, to swallow their dignity because powerful people demanded it. She reached across the table and took the thumb drive. Give me everything, she said. Every video, every email, every complaint that got buried. I want it all. Washington's face showed relief and guilt in equal measure. Once this goes public, there's no taking it back. You understand that? I understand that hiding didn't protect me. Being invisible didn't keep me safe. Vanderholt came after me anyway, would have humiliated me whether I fought back or not. Lena tucked the drive into her jacket pocket. At least this way, when he destroys me, it'll mean something. They talked for another hour, Washington walking her through the evidence, explaining his documentation process, identifying patterns and particularly egregious incidents. Hotel maids pressured for sexual favors. Minority employees passed over for promotion regardless of qualifications. Complaints about safety hazards ignored until someone got injured. Wage theft disguised as payroll errors. All of it documented, all of it showing a culture of abuse protected from the top down. There's one more thing you should know, Washington said as they prepared to leave. Derek Mills, the assistant who scouted you for Vanderholt, he contacted me this morning. Wants to talk. Says he has information about other incidents, other victims. Says he's tired of being complicit. Can you trust him? I don't know. He's been Vanderholt's right hand for 6 years. Could be a setup, could be genuine guilt. But if he's real, if he's willing to testify to what he's witnessed, that's huge. That's inside corroboration. Lena considered this. Set up a meeting. Let me talk to him. If he's lying, I'll know. You sure about that? I spent 5 years learning to read people. Learning to tell the difference between genuine kindness and condescension disguised as help. Between real allies and people who just want to feel good about themselves. She stood, her legs screaming in protest. I can spot a liar. They left the coffee shop separately, Washington first, then Lena 5 minutes later. As she walked toward the subway, she felt the weight of the thumb drive in her pocket, felt the weight of responsibility settling onto her shoulders. This was bigger than one dance now, bigger than personal revenge or vindication. This was about the young server and Victor Torres and Derek Mills and everyone else ground up in the machinery of Marcus Vanderholt's ego. The subway was crowded with Sunday afternoon travelers. Lena found a spot to stand gripping the pole and checked her phone. The videos from last night were still circulating, had spawned 1,000 variations and commentary tracks. But now there were new threads emerging, people sharing their own stories about Vanderholt, about his properties, about the culture of fear and exploitation. Someone had created a website, vanderholtvictims.com, a place for people to share their experiences anonymously, to break the silence enforced by NDAs and intimidation. Already there were dozens of stories, some detailed, some just a few sentences, all of them painting a picture of systematic abuse. Lena read through them, her anger building with each one. A single mother fired for refusing her manager's advances. A maintenance worker injured on the job, then blamed for the accident and denied workers' comp. A front desk clerk who reported financial irregularities and got blacklisted across the entire hotel chain. Story after story of people crushed by a system designed to protect the powerful and punish the vulnerable. Her phone rang. Amanda Reeves from The Times. Lena hesitated, then answered. This is Lena Brooks? Ms. Brooks, thank you for taking my call. I know you're being inundated right now. Reeves's voice was professional but warm. I want to be upfront with you. I've been investigating Marcus Vanderholt for 9 months, financial irregularities, labor violations, corruption. But I need people willing to go on record. I need victims willing to put their names to their stories. Why me? Because you already did. You're already public. You're already facing his retaliation, and you have credibility. You're not some disgruntled employee making vague accusations. You're someone with a documented history, with videos showing exactly what happened, with witnesses who saw him try to humiliate you. Reeves paused. You're the crack in his armor. I'm not trying to be a symbol, Lena said. I just wanted to finish my shift. That's what makes you perfect. You're not an activist with an agenda. You're not a competitor with business motivations. You're just a person who refused to accept abuse. That's the story that resonates. Lena thought about the thumb drive, about Washington's 18 months of evidence, about Derek Mills potentially ready to flip, about the website filling with testimonials. If I talk to you, she said slowly, I need guarantees, protection for other sources. No revealing information that could identify people who aren't ready to be public. And fact-checking. I'm not going to be used to spread information that isn't verified. Absolutely. Those are standard practices for investigative journalism. We protect sources. We verify everything. We don't publish until we're certain. Reeves's voice intensified. But Miss Brooks, if you have evidence, real evidence of patterns and practices, that could be the foundation for something that actually creates change. I might have access to that kind of evidence, but I need to talk to lawyers first. Make sure I'm not violating any laws by sharing it. Smart. Do that. And when you're ready, call me, day or night. Reeves gave her a direct number. This story is bigger than one person's revenge. This is about accountability for people who think they're above consequences. After ending the call, Lena got off at her stop and walked to the hotel James had arranged. She needed to look at the evidence properly, needed to understand exactly what she was dealing with before making any more commitments. Back in her room, she plugged the thumb drive into her laptop. The files were meticulously organized, folders by date, by incident type, by location. Washington had done real work here, had built a case rather than just collecting random grievances. Lena started watching videos, conference room footage of Vanderholt berating staff, calling them idiots, and worse. Security camera evidence of him groping female employees, then denying it when complaints were filed. Audio recordings of conversations about burying safety reports, falsifying maintenance records, paying off inspectors. Email chains showing how HR complaints got routed to lawyers who intimidated victims into silence. Hours passed. Lena's anger turned to something colder, harder. This wasn't just one bad man. This was an entire system built to enable his behavior, to protect him from consequences, to ensure that victims had no recourse. The hotels, the boards, the lawyers, the PR firms, all of them complicit, all of them profiting from a culture that treated workers as disposable. A knock on her door pulled her from the screen. She checked the peephole to see James Vanderholt, looking anxious. She let him in. Your father is worse than I thought. James's face was haggard. I know. I've spent the day going through foundation files, looking at his involvement in funding decisions. Lena, he's been systematically blocking grants for programs that support minority artists, dancers from low-income backgrounds, anyone who doesn't fit his narrow definition of worthy. The foundation is supposed to expand access to the arts, and he's been using his board position to do the opposite. Can you prove it? I have emails, vote records, budget decisions that make no sense unless you understand he's deliberately undermining the mission. James sat heavily in the desk chair. I should have looked earlier, should have questioned why certain programs always got vetoed, but I didn't want to see it. Didn't want to confront what it meant about my family, about the money I've lived on my whole life. Lena studied him. He looked genuinely tormented, genuinely ashamed. But she also knew that his pain was optional, was a luxury he could afford because he had resources and options she didn't. What are you going to do? She asked. I'm resigning from the foundation board, and I'm releasing a statement about why, about how my father has corrupted an institution meant to serve the public good. My lawyers are advising against it, saying it'll destroy my relationship with him permanently, but I don't care anymore. Yes, you do, Lena said quietly. You care a lot, and you should care. He's your father. But you're choosing to do the right thing anyway, and that matters. James looked at her with something like gratitude. Have you decided about the legal representation? About fighting back? I'm in, all the way in. I have evidence that goes beyond my personal situation, evidence of systemic abuse across multiple properties, multiple years. I'm going to share it with your lawyers, with the Times, with anyone who can use it to hold him accountable. That's brave. That's incredibly brave. No, it's necessary. Bravery is when you have a choice. Not really. He's already coming after me. At least this way I'm moving forward instead of just defending. James pulled out a folder. These are the contracts we discussed: legal representation, PR support, financial assistance if needed. Everything is structured through the foundation to keep it legitimate and documented. You're not obligated to me personally. This is institutional support. Lena reviewed the documents more carefully this time. The language was clear, the terms reasonable. She wasn't signing away control or agency. She was accepting help while maintaining autonomy. It was as good as she was going to get. She signed. "There's one more thing," James said hesitantly. "Tomorrow's press conference at the foundation. My mother will be there." Lena looked up sharply. "Your mother?" "Victoria Vanderholt. She's on the foundation board too. And she's been married to my father for 32 years. James's voice was strained. "She's known what he is. Hasn't known all of it maybe, but known enough. And she's chosen to look the other way because the alternative meant giving up the lifestyle, the status, the security." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because she's going to try to smooth things over, to offer you a settlement, a quiet resolution that makes this all go away. She's very good at managing my father's messes, at making uncomfortable situations disappear." James met her eyes. "I want you to be prepared for that. Want you to know that not everyone in my family wants you to fight. But you do. I think what you're doing is necessary. I think my father needs to face real consequences for once in his life. But I also think you should know what you're up against. And that includes people who seem kind, seem reasonable, but are ultimately protecting the system that enables him." After James left, Lena sat with the signed contracts, with the thumb drive full of evidence, with the weight of tomorrow's press conference pressing down on her. She thought about calling her old physical therapist, the one who'd helped her learn to walk again after the accident. Thought about the months of painful recovery, the slow rebuilding of strength, the grinding daily work of healing. This felt similar. She was broken again, but differently. Not physically this time, but circumstantially. Her life shattered by a moment of defiance, by refusing to accept humiliation quietly. And now she had to decide whether to put in the work of rebuilding, whether to believe that fighting back could lead to something better than just surviving. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Derek Mills. Marcus Washington said you wanted to talk. I have information about the setup last night and other incidents. Can we meet?" Lena stared at the message. This could be legitimate, a guilty man trying to unburden his conscience. Or it could be a trap. Vanderholt using his assistant to gather information about what Lena knew, what evidence she had, how she was planning to use it. She texted back, "Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., public location of my choosing. I'll send address." Within seconds. "Agreed. Thank you for hearing me out." Lena chose a location carefully, a library in Queens with good sight lines, multiple exits, and enough people that anything suspicious would be noticed. Then she texted the details to Marcus Washington. "Meeting Derek Mills tomorrow at 10, Queens Central Library, second floor reading room. I'd appreciate backup, just in case." Washington's response was immediate. "I'll be there. Different floor, keeping watch. If anything feels wrong, text 911 and I'll intervene." The rest of the evening, Lena prepared. She reviewed the evidence Washington had provided, making notes about what corroborated what, which incidents had multiple sources, which victims might be willing to testify if they had protection. She researched defamation law, understanding what she could legally say and what crossed into actionable territory. She drafted talking points for tomorrow's press conference, focusing on systemic issues rather than personal grievances. By midnight, her leg was throbbing so badly she could barely stand. She took more ibuprofen, did gentle stretches at the bar she'd found in the hotel gym, and reminded herself that pain was just information. Her body was telling her she'd pushed too hard, demanded too much from damaged tissue and compromised bones. But her body had been telling her that for 5 years, and she'd survived anyway. She could survive this too. The next morning, Lena dressed carefully for the library meeting, professional but not threatening, approachable but not weak. She arrived early, chose a table with clear views of entrances and exits, and waited. Derek Mills arrived exactly on time. He looked worse than he had at the gala, dark circles under his eyes, hands shaking slightly as he set down his coffee. He scanned the room nervously before sitting across from Lena. "Thank you for meeting me," he said quietly. "I wasn't sure you would." "I'm not sure I should have," Lena replied. "Give me a reason to trust you." Derek pulled out his phone, opened a voice recording app, and set it on the table between them. "I want to record this conversation. Full transparency. Everything I tell you, I'm willing to repeat to lawyers, journalists, investigators. I'm done hiding. Why now? You've been working for Vanderholt for 6 years. What changed? What changed is that I watched him try to destroy you for the crime of dancing well. Watched him plan it, execute it, and then turn vicious when it didn't work." Derek's voice cracked. "And I realized I've been helping him do this to people for years. I've scouted targets. I've gathered information he used to humiliate people. I've written the emails that buried complaints. I've been his weapon, and I told myself it was just a job, just following orders. Sounds like you're looking for forgiveness. I'm not. I don't deserve it. I deserve to be held accountable for what I've done." Derek met her eyes, and the self-loathing there was genuine. "But I can't undo the past. All I can do is try to prevent future harm. And the way to do that is to expose how the system works, how he gets away with it, how people like me enable it." Lena studied him carefully, looking for signs of deception, but all she saw was exhaustion and shame and a desperate need to unburden himself. "Tell me about the setup," she said. "How you were told to scout me." Derek took a breath, then began talking. He described how Vanderholt had arrived at the hotel early, already drunk, already looking for entertainment, how he'd instructed Derek to find someone who'd be easy to humiliate, young, attractive, female, preferably with poor English or obvious vulnerability. How Derek had watched staff for an hour before approaching Lena. How he'd asked about dancing specifically because Vanderholt had already decided that would be the challenge. "I told him you said you knew basic steps but weren't confident," Derek said. "That was supposed to be the joke. Making someone incompetent dance in front of the elite. He was supposed to laugh, the crowd was supposed to laugh, and you were supposed to be so embarrassed you'd quit or at least never challenge anyone important again. Except I wasn't incompetent. Except you weren't. And when you accepted the challenge with that calm look on your face, I knew something was wrong, knew he'd miscalculated. But by then it was too late. The bet was public, people were recording, and he couldn't back out without looking weak." Derek's smile was bitter. "He looked weak anyway. You made him look like exactly what he is, a small man who needs other people to be smaller so he can feel big. What else has he done? Who else has he hurt?" Derek began listing incidents, providing names and dates and details. A banquet server he'd pressured into a relationship, then fired when she tried to end it. A concierge who'd reported financial irregularities and got framed for theft. A chef who'd objected to health code violations and found himself blacklisted across every restaurant group Vanderholt had connections with. Story after story, each one documented in Derek's meticulous records, because that was his job, to remember, to track, to provide his boss with the information needed to destroy people who got in his way. "I have emails," Derek said, "texts, voice memos, everything I was supposed to delete, but kept because some part of me knew this was wrong, knew someday it might matter." "Why didn't you go to authorities before?" "Because I was afraid. Because I liked my salary and my apartment and my status. Because I told myself these people deserved it somehow, had brought it on themselves by not being smarter or tougher or more careful." Derek's voice hardened. "And because I watched what happened to people who did complain. They got destroyed so completely it was like they'd never existed. Who wants to be that person?" Lena understood that fear intimately, had lived with it for 3 years, had chosen invisibility over risk, had survived by not being seen. Until one night when being seen became unavoidable. "What are you willing to do?" she asked. Specifically. "Whatever it takes. Testify in court, talk to journalists, provide documentation. I'll break my NDA, risk the lawsuits, accept the consequences." Derek looked at her steadily. I know this doesn't fix what I've done, doesn't make me a good person, but maybe it makes me less of a coward. They talked for 2 more hours. Derek walked Lena through the power structure, explaining how Vanderholt used his various positions, hotel investor, foundation board member, real estate developer, to create a network of leverage and control. How he traded favors with other wealthy men, protecting each other's interests and burying each other's scandals. How the system was designed to be impenetrable, with lawyers and fixers and PR specialists all working to ensure consequences only flowed downward, never up. By the time they finished, Lena had enough information to connect dots she hadn't even known existed. The thumb drive from Washington, combined with Derek's testimony, created a comprehensive picture of institutional corruption and abuse. Thank you, she said as they prepared to leave. I know this cost you something. It cost me a job I should have quit years ago, and a boss I should have exposed the first time I watched him hurt someone. Derek stood, looking lighter somehow, despite the weight of what he'd confessed. The only thing I regret is not doing it sooner. After he left, Lena texted Marcus Washington. He's legitimate. Evidence is real. We need to get him protection. Vanderholt will come after him hard when he finds out. Washington's response, already on it. Foundation lawyers are preparing witness protection protocols. He'll be safe. Lena left the library and headed to the Metropolitan Arts Foundation, where the press conference was scheduled for 2 p.m. The foundation occupied a beautiful brownstone in the Upper West Side, all high ceilings and crown molding and walls covered with photos of artists they'd supported over the decades. Maestro Chen met her at the door, looking both excited and nervous. Thank you for coming, Chen said, leading Lena to a conference room where others were gathering. We've prepared a statement, but we wanted your input before finalizing it. James Vanderholt was there, looking uncomfortable in a suit. So was Marcus Washington, officially attending as security consultant. And sitting in the corner, perfectly composed in a cream-colored suit, was a woman Lena recognized from photos. Victoria Vanderholt, Marcus's wife, James's mother. She stood as Lena entered, extending a perfectly manicured hand. Ms. Brooks, I've been hoping to meet you, though I wish it were under different circumstances. Her voice was cultured, warm, and absolutely terrifying in its calculated precision. This was a woman who'd spent 3 decades managing the social consequences of her husband's behavior, who'd turned crisis management into an art form. Mrs. Vanderholt, Lena said neutrally, accepting the handshake. Please, call me Victoria. And please, if you have a moment before the press conference, I'd love to speak with you privately. Victoria's smile was perfect, her eyes assessing. I think we may have more in common than you realize. Lena glanced at James, who gave a small nod. Warning or encouragement, she couldn't tell. Of course, Lena said. Let's talk. Victoria Vanderholt led Lena to a smaller office down the hall, furnished with the kind of understated elegance that screamed old money. She closed the door gently, gestured to a leather chair, and settled herself across from Lena with the grace of someone who'd spent a lifetime making uncomfortable conversations look easy. I want to start by apologizing for my husband's behavior, Victoria said, her voice smooth as aged whiskey. What he did to you was cruel and unacceptable. Marcus has always had a talent for finding someone's vulnerabilities and exploiting them. It's one of his less admirable qualities. One of many, it seems, Lena said evenly. Victoria's smile didn't falter. I won't insult your intelligence by pretending I don't know why you're here, what evidence you've gathered, or what you're planning to do with it. I have my own sources, my own ways of knowing what's happening in my husband's world. And yet you've stayed married to him for 32 years. I have, which either makes me complicit or strategic, depending on your perspective. Victoria crossed her legs, the picture of composure. I'm not here to defend Marcus. I'm here to offer you an alternative to the war you're about to start. Lena's guard went up immediately. I'm listening? Marcus has authorized me to offer you a settlement, $2 million paid out over 5 years through a charitable trust established in your name. You'd have full control over how the money is distributed, scholarships for dancers, funding for arts education, whatever causes matter to you. In exchange, you sign an NDA regarding the events at the gala and any other interactions with my husband, and you decline to participate in any legal proceedings or media coverage related to him. $2 million. The number hung in the air between them, impossible and tempting. That was safety, security, the ability to build something meaningful without worrying about rent or medical bills or whether fighting back would leave her homeless. That's a very generous offer, Lena said carefully, which makes me wonder what it's really buying. Silence, obviously. Victoria's directness was almost refreshing. Marcus is facing multiple investigations right now. Labor violations, financial irregularities, potential criminal charges. Your testimony, your evidence, would accelerate those cases considerably. Without you, his lawyers can delay, obfuscate, settle quietly. With you as a visible, sympathetic victim, this becomes a public reckoning he can't control. So you're asking me to let him escape accountability so I can have money? I'm asking you to consider the cost of your principles. Fighting Marcus will consume years of your life. You'll spend them in depositions and court appearances and media interviews, being torn apart by his defense team, having every mistake you've ever made weaponized against you. You'll win, probably. The evidence is damning. But what will you have left when it's over? Victoria leaned forward slightly. The money I'm offering would let you build a life. Support the next generation of dancers. Create the opportunities you never had. Isn't that worth more than revenge? It's not revenge. It's justice. Justice is what we call revenge when we want to feel noble about it. Victoria's voice sharpened. I've watched this movie before, Ms. Brooks. I've seen people take on my husband, convinced they're fighting the good fight. Some of them won their cases. Got settlements, got apologies, got the satisfaction of proving they were right. And you know what they all have in common? They're broken. The process destroyed them as thoroughly as Marcus ever could have. The system isn't designed to heal victims. It's designed to grind everyone down until nobody has the energy to keep fighting. Lena thought about the thumb drive in her bag, about Derek Mills' testimony, about the victims sharing their stories online, finding courage in numbers, about the possibility that this time could be different, that collective action could overwhelm even Vanderholt's resources. What if I don't want to be bought off? She asked. Then you'll fight, and you'll suffer, and eventually you'll win something that feels hollow because of what it costs to get there. Victoria stood, moving to the window that overlooked a small garden. I'm not your enemy, Lena. I'm someone who understands how the world actually works, who's learned that idealism is expensive and compromise is survival. You're someone who's chosen to protect a predator because it's comfortable, because leaving would mean giving up the lifestyle and the status and the security. Lena kept her voice level, but the words cut anyway. James told me you've known what Marcus is, that you've been managing his messes for decades. You're not a victim of his behavior. You're an enabler of it. For the first time, Victoria's composure cracked. Just slightly, just for a moment. You think I don't know that? You think I haven't spent 32 years making calculations about what I could live with and what I couldn't? I was 23 when I married Marcus, pregnant with James. My family had money once, but we'd lost it. Bad investments, worse decisions. Marcus offered security, offered a future for my child. And yes, I knew he was ruthless. I told myself it was just business, just the way powerful men operated. When did you realize it was more than that? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. 7 years in, there was a woman who worked in one of his hotels. She filed a harassment complaint, said Marcus had pressured her for sexual favors, retaliated when she refused. I didn't want to believe it. Told myself she was lying, looking for money. But then I found the settlement agreement, saw the NDA, saw the pattern of payments to other women who'd made similar claims. She turned back to Lena, and her eyes were hard. I could have left then. Should have left. But I had a 6-year-old son and no career and a lifestyle I'd grown dependent on. So I made a choice. I stayed and I managed. I became the woman who smoothed things over, who made problems disappear, who protected the empire. You could still leave now. To what? I'm 55 years old. My entire adult life has been built around Marcus's money and power. I have no independent career, no financial resources that aren't tied to him. New York State isn't a community property state. If I divorce him, I get whatever the prenup allows, which is enough to be comfortable, but not enough to maintain the life I've built. Victoria's smile was bitter. I made my choices a long time ago. Now I live with them. Then why are you here? If you're committed to protecting him, why try to buy me off? Why not just let his lawyers crush me? Because you're different. You're sympathetic in a way that terrifies Marcus and should terrify me. You're not a disgruntled employee with an axe to grind. You're a talented artist who was destroyed by circumstance, who rebuilt your life with dignity, who was attacked for no reason other than a powerful man's amusement. Your story resonates. It makes people angry in ways that could actually create change. Victoria moved closer, her voice dropping. And if you succeed, if you actually manage to hold Marcus accountable, to strip away his protections, to force real consequences, it doesn't just hurt him, it hurts everyone who's built their lives around his empire, including me, including James, whether he wants to admit it or not. James wants his father held accountable. James is 28 years old and has never wanted for anything in his life. He can afford idealism because he's never had to choose between principles and survival. If Marcus's empire collapses, James will be fine. He has his own trust fund, his own investments, his own future. Victoria's eyes were fierce. But there are hundreds of people employed across Marcus's properties. Staff who depend on their paychecks, who have families to support, who will lose their jobs if his companies go bankrupt fighting legal battles. Are you prepared for that collateral damage? It was a good argument, a strategic one. Victoria was trying to make Lena feel responsible for consequences that were actually Marcus's fault, trying to shift the weight of accountability from the perpetrator to the victim. It was the same tactic abusers always used: make the victim responsible for keeping the peace, for protecting everyone else, for swallowing their pain so the system could continue functioning. Those people deserve better than jobs dependent on protecting a predator, Lena said quietly. If Vanderholt's empire collapses because he's held accountable for his actions, that's his fault, not mine. I'm not responsible for the consequences of his choices. Spoken like someone who's never had to consider the real-world impact of their moral clarity. Victoria's voice was sharp now, the velvet glove coming off. You want to be the hero of this story, the brave victim who stands up and changes everything. But heroes don't pay the rent for the single mother who loses her housekeeping job when the hotel closes. Heroes don't explain to the maintenance workers' kids why daddy can't find work, because the whole industry knows you don't hire people from Vanderholt properties. Too much liability, too much risk. So your solution is to let Marcus keep hurting people? To let the abuse continue so nobody has to deal with the discomfort of change? My solution is to take the money, build something positive, and let the system handle Marcus in its own time. The investigations will continue with or without you. Lawsuits will proceed from other victims. Change will come, but gradually, in ways that don't destroy innocent people along with the guilty. Victoria pulled out a folder from her bag, set it on the desk between them. $2 million, complete control over distribution, no strings except silence. Think about what you could build with that. Lena looked at the folder without touching it. She thought about the scholarship fund Maestro Chen wanted to establish. About young dancers who'd face the same barriers she had, who'd need support to survive injuries or setbacks, or the simple economics of pursuing art in a world that didn't value it. $2 million could change dozens of lives, could create opportunities that didn't exist, could prevent other people from ending up cleaning hotel rooms because the arts world had discarded them. But it would also mean letting Marcus Vanderholt escape, mean that Derek Mills's courage in coming forward would be wasted, mean that all the other victims sharing their stories would face his lawyers alone, mean that the next person he targeted would have no precedent to point to, no proof that standing up mattered. I can't, Lena said. I appreciate what you're offering, and I understand why you're offering it, but I can't take money in exchange for letting him avoid consequences. It's not about being a hero. It's about the fact that silence has a cost too, and I'm not willing to pay it anymore. Victoria studied her for a long moment, and something like respect flickered in her eyes. You're making a mistake, but I admire your conviction, even if I think it's misplaced. She picked up the folder, tucked it back into her bag. The offer stands if you change your mind. And Lena, when this gets ugly, and it will get very ugly, remember that I tried to give you an exit ramp. I'll remember that you tried to protect your husband's empire by buying my silence. That's not the same thing as offering help. Victoria's smile was cold. In my experience, they're often identical. You just don't know it yet. She left the office, closing the door with a soft click that somehow felt more final than a slam would have. Lena sat for a moment, processing what had just happened. then pulled out her phone and texted James. "Your mother just offered me $2 million to stay quiet. I declined. Thought you should know." His response came immediately. "I'm sorry. I warned her not to try, but she doesn't listen to me. Are you okay?" Lena wasn't sure how to answer that. Was she okay? She'd just turned down financial security and committed herself to a war she couldn't be certain of winning. She was unemployed, facing lawsuits, about to become even more of a target. By any objective measure, she was the opposite of okay. But she also felt something she hadn't felt in 5 years. Purpose. Direction. The sense that what she did mattered, that her choices had weight beyond just personal survival. She texted back, "I'm ready for the press conference. Let's do this." The conference room was filling with journalists when Lena returned. She recognized Amanda Reeves from The Times, saw reporters from The Post and the Daily News, noticed camera crews from local TV stations. This was bigger than she'd anticipated, the story having grown beyond one incident into something about wealth, power, and accountability. Maestro Chen took her aside. "You don't have to do this if you're not ready. We can make the statement without you. Protect your privacy." "I'm ready," Lena said. "Victoria Vanderholt just tried to buy my silence. I think that tells me everything I need to know about how worried they are." Chen's eyes widened. "She offered you money?" $2 million, which means they think my testimony is worth more than that to suppress." Lena felt a grim satisfaction. We must have them scared. Or we've made them desperate, which could be more dangerous. Chen gestured toward the assembled press. "Once you speak publicly, there's no taking it back. Marcus Vanderholt will come at you with everything he has. Are you absolutely certain?" Lena thought about the young server who'd spilled a drink, about Victor Torres and his 22 years of loyalty, about Derek Mills and his years of complicity, about all the people who'd stayed silent because speaking up seemed impossible, because the cost seemed too high, because nobody had ever successfully challenged the system before. "I'm certain," she said. They took their positions at a table facing the cameras. Maestro Chen in the center, Lena to her right, James Vanderholt to her left. Marcus Washington stood in the back, his presence a quiet reassurance. The room quieted as Chen leaned toward the microphone. "Thank you all for coming. I'm Maestro Chen, director of the Metropolitan Arts Foundation. We've called this press conference to address recent events involving our foundation board member Marcus Vanderholt and his treatment of former American Ballet Theater principal dancer Lena Brooks." Chen's voice was steady, authoritative. 4 days ago, Mr. Vanderholt publicly challenged Ms. Brooks to a dance competition, intending to humiliate her in front of 300 guests at our annual gala. What he didn't know was that Miss Brooks is one of the most accomplished ballet dancers of her generation, whose career was ended by a tragic accident 5 years ago. The room was completely silent, every reporter focused. Ms. Brooks accepted his challenge and performed beautifully. But instead of acknowledging his misjudgment with grace, Mr. Vanderholt has responded by attempting to have her fired from her job, filing frivolous lawsuits, and launching a media campaign to destroy her reputation. Chen paused, letting that sink in. This is not an isolated incident. We have since learned of a pattern of abusive behavior spanning decades. Harassment, discrimination, retaliation against employees who complained about misconduct. This behavior is antithetical to everything our foundation stands for. A reporter raised her hand. Is the foundation taking action against Mr. Vanderholt? We are voting to remove him from our board, effective immediately. We are also conducting a full review of every funding decision he influenced, to ensure that personal bias hasn't compromised our mission of supporting diverse artists. Chen looked directly at the cameras. And we are establishing the Lena Brooks Resilience Fund, a scholarship program for dancers who face career-ending injuries or circumstances that force them out of professional dance, because no artist should end up forgotten and discarded when their body can't perform at elite levels anymore. The questions came rapid fire then, journalists competing for attention. Chen fielded them expertly, providing facts without speculation, making clear that this was about institutional accountability rather than personal vendetta. Then Amanda Reeves stood. "Ms. Brooks, you've been silent since the gala. What made you decide to speak out now?" Lena leaned toward her microphone, feeling the weight of all those eyes on her. "I didn't want to speak out. I wanted to keep my head down, do my job, and not make trouble." That's what I've been doing for 5 years, surviving by being invisible. But Marcus Vanderholt decided I didn't deserve that option. He targeted me for his entertainment, tried to humiliate me publicly, and when that failed, he tried to destroy me privately. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I'm speaking now because staying silent protects him more than it protects me. Because there are other victims who deserve to know they're not alone. Because the system only works for people like Marcus Vanderholt when everyone else is too afraid to speak up. Are you afraid now? Reeves asked. Terrified, Lena admitted. He's powerful, wealthy, and surrounded by people who enable his worst impulses. He can afford lawyers I can't, can weather scandals I can't, can outlast legal battles I can't. But I'm more afraid of what it means to stay silent. More afraid of teaching young dancers that survival means accepting abuse. More afraid of the person I'd become if I took the easy money and looked away. Another reporter jumped in. You mentioned easy money. There are rumors the Vanderholt family offered you a settlement. Lena glanced at James, who gave a slight nod. Permission to share. Victoria Vanderholt offered me $2 million this morning to sign an NDA and drop any cooperation with investigations into her husband. I declined. The room erupted, cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions over each other. Chen raised her hands for quiet. Why did you turn it down? Someone called out. Because $2 million buys silence, not justice. It ensures that the next person Marcus Vanderholt targets will be alone. It tells every victim that their pain has a price and powerful people can afford it. Lena's voice strengthened. I don't want to be bought. I want to be heard. James leaned forward then, his expression resolute. I want to add something. I'm Marcus Vanderholt's son. I've benefited my entire life from his wealth and influence. And I'm here to say that what my father did to Ms. Brooks is consistent with a pattern of behavior I've witnessed for years. A pattern of treating people as disposable, of using power to avoid accountability, of believing that money and status put him above basic human decency. You could have heard a pin drop. I'm resigning from the Metropolitan Arts Foundation Board in protest of my father's actions and the culture that enabled them. I'm making available to investigators all correspondence and documentation I have access to regarding foundation decisions that may have been compromised by personal bias. And I'm establishing an independent fund to support victims of workplace harassment and discrimination who can't afford legal representation. James looked directly at the cameras. My father taught me that power is about dominance, about making sure everyone knows their place. But Lena Brooks taught me that real power is about refusing to accept the place powerful people assign you. It's about standing up even when standing up seems impossible. I'm choosing to stand with her, even though it means standing against my own family. The questions intensified then, reporters sensing blood in the water. How much was James's fund? Would he testify against his father? What about his inheritance, his mother's reaction, the family business interests? James answered each question carefully, making clear that this wasn't about destroying his father, but about accountability, about breaking cycles of abuse enabled by wealth and silence, about using his privilege to support change rather than maintain the status quo. Lena watched him and felt a complicated mix of emotions: gratitude for his support, skepticism about his motives, recognition that his sacrifice was real but also optional in ways hers wasn't. He could always reconcile with his family eventually, could always return to that world if he wanted. She had no such safety net. The press conference lasted 90 minutes. By the end, Lena's leg was screaming and her voice was hoarse. But the message was clear, was on record, was being broadcast and shared and discussed. This wasn't just about one dance anymore. This was about power and accountability and whether wealth could buy immunity from consequences. As the room cleared, Marcus Washington approached Lena. Derek Mills just texted. He's ready to give his statement to the Times. And I've had 3 other former Vanderholt employees contact me in the last hour. They saw the press conference and want to share their stories too. This is building, Lena. This is actually building. Before Lena could respond, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Ms. Brooks? The voice was male, controlled, cold. This is Marcus Vanderholt. Lena's blood went ice. She gestured to Washington, who immediately started recording on his phone. Mr. Vanderholt, she said evenly, I didn't expect to hear from you directly. I wanted to congratulate you on your performance today. Very moving, very convincing. You've managed to paint yourself as the victim and me as the villain. Well done." His voice dripped contempt. "But let me be very clear about something. You think you've won because you got some good press coverage, because my idiot son is having a crisis of conscience, because a few disgruntled employees are coming out of the woodwork. You haven't won anything. You've just made this personal." "It was always personal, Mr. Vanderholt. You made it personal when you tried to humiliate me for your entertainment." "That was business. This is personal." Vanderholt's voice lowered, became more menacing. "I'm going to destroy you, Ms. Brooks. Not quickly. That would be merciful. Slowly. Thoroughly. I'm going to take apart your life piece by piece. Every friend, every opportunity, every moment of peace. By the time I'm done, you'll wish you'd taken my wife's generous offer." "Is that a threat, Mr. Vanderholt?" "It's a promise. You want to play in the big leagues? Fine. Let me show you what happens when you go after someone who actually has power." He paused. "You think you're brave. You're not. You're just too stupid to understand what you've started." The line went dead. Lena lowered the phone, her hand shaking slightly. Washington stopped recording, his face grim. "That's direct harassment," he said. "With witnesses and recording, we can add this to the evidence." "He knows," Lena said quietly. "He knows we're recording, knows everything becomes evidence. He doesn't care. That's how confident he is that consequences don't apply to him." James had been listening, his face pale. "He's escalating. When my father feels cornered, he gets vicious. We need to prepare for whatever he's planning." "Well, what could be worse than what he's already doing?" Lena asked. "I don't know," James said honestly, "but my father is very creative when it comes to destruction. And now he's not just trying to make a problem go away, he's trying to make an example of you, to prove that challenging him is futile." Lena thought about that threat, about the promise of slow, thorough destruction. Part of her wanted to be afraid, wanted to reconsider, to take the 2 million and disappear, to choose safety over justice. But a larger part of her remembered the feeling of dancing across that ballroom floor, the feeling of reclaiming something she'd thought was lost forever, the feeling of choosing dignity over survival, courage over caution. She'd already been destroyed once. The accident had shattered her body, ended her career, taken everything she'd built, and she'd survived it, had rebuilt from nothing, had learned that she was stronger than she'd thought, that survival itself was a kind of victory. Marcus Vanderholt could threaten her all he wanted, but he couldn't take anything she wasn't willing to give, and she wasn't giving him her silence anymore. "Let him come," Lena said quietly. "I'm not backing down." Marcus Washington nodded approvingly. James looked worried but determined. And somewhere in Manhattan, Marcus Vanderholt was learning that power had limits, that money couldn't buy everything, that some people refused to be broken no matter how hard you pushed. The war was just beginning. But for the first time in 5 years, Lena Brooks felt like she was fighting for something that mattered, something bigger than survival, something worth the cost. And that made all the difference. The backlash came faster and harder than anyone anticipated. Within 24 hours of the press conference, Marcus Vanderholt's legal team filed 3 new lawsuits: defamation, conspiracy to commit fraud, and tortious interference with business relationships. The complaints were thick with legalese and accusations, painting Lena as a con artist who'd orchestrated an elaborate scheme to extort a wealthy family, with James and the Metropolitan Arts Foundation as willing accomplices. But Vanderholt had miscalculated. He'd assumed his usual playbook would work: bury the victim in legal fees, drag out proceedings until exhaustion forced settlement, use media connections to control the narrative. What he hadn't counted on was the internet's ability to bypass traditional gatekeepers, or the speed with which collective anger could mobilize. The Vanderholt victims' website crashed from traffic within hours of the press conference. Over 300 people submitted testimonials in the first day alone. Former employees, business partners, vendors who'd been stiffed on payments, women who'd faced harassment, workers who'd been injured and denied compensation. The stories created a mosaic of systematic abuse that no PR firm could spin away. Amanda Reeves's New York Times investigation published 2 days later a comprehensive exposé drawing on Derek Mills's testimony, Marcus Washington's documentation, and interviews with 47 victims willing to go on record. The headline read, "Empire of Cruelty: How Marcus Vanderholt Built Wealth on Workers' Backs. It was devastating, meticulously sourced, impossible to dismiss as biased journalism. Other outlets followed. The Wall Street Journal examined financial irregularities in Vanderholt's real estate deals. ProPublica investigated labor law violations across his hotel properties. Local news stations interviewed housekeepers, maintenance workers, and servers who'd been systematically exploited. The story metastasized beyond one man's behavior into questions about wealth inequality, corporate accountability, and systems that protected the powerful while crushing the vulnerable. Lena watched it unfold from the hotel room James had secured for her, her laptop open to multiple news feeds, her phone buzzing with constant notifications. It was surreal, seeing her face on television, hearing anchors discuss her story, watching legal analysts debate the strength of various cases. She'd become a symbol without meaning to, a catalyst for conversations about power and justice that extended far beyond her personal grievance. "You need to see this," Marcus Washington said, arriving at her room 3 days after the press conference. He was carrying a laptop, his expression carefully neutral. The Manhattan DA's office just announced a criminal investigation into Vanderholt's business practices. They're looking at wage theft, tax fraud, and potential racketeering charges. Racketeering? Lena looked up sharply. That's RICO. That's serious. Very serious. Apparently Derek Mills's testimony about how Vanderholt coordinated with other developers to suppress wages and blacklist union organizers caught their attention. Combined with the financial documentation showing systematic fraud across multiple properties, they think they have a pattern that qualifies. Washington set down the laptop, showing her the DA's press release. This isn't civil litigation anymore, Lena. This is criminal prosecution. If they can make the charges stick, Vanderholt could face actual prison time. Lena read through the statement, her heart pounding. She'd wanted accountability, had wanted consequences, but she'd never imagined it would escalate this far this fast. Criminal charges meant the state taking over prosecution, meant resources beyond what any individual victim could muster, meant the full weight of the justice system focused on one man's decades of abuse. "How is he reacting?" she asked. "Badly. His lawyers are threatening everyone, the DA, the media outlets, witnesses. He tried to fire his entire legal team yesterday because they couldn't make this go away. His wife left him 2 days ago, checked into a hotel with divorce papers." Washington's expression was grim. "He's cornered, and cornered predators are the most dangerous." As if on cue, Lena's phone rang. James Vanderholt. "Lena, are you somewhere safe right now?" His voice was tight with urgency. "I'm at the hotel you arranged. Why?" "Because my father just showed up at the foundation offices looking for you. He's drunk, angry, and security had to escort him out. He was shouting that you ruined his life, that he was going to make you pay." James took a shaky breath. "I've never seen him like this. Completely unhinged. I think he's having some kind of breakdown." "Good," Lena said flatly. "Maybe he's finally experiencing consequences." "I'm serious, Lena. He's not rational right now. I'm worried he might try to hurt you, physically, I mean." Washington was already on his phone making calls. "I'm getting additional security on your floor," he told Lena, "and I'm contacting NYPD to file a report about the harassment and threats. We need documentation if this escalates." Over the next week, Marcus Vanderholt's empire began to crumble in earnest. 3 major hotel chains announced they were severing business relationships with his companies. The Metropolitan Arts Foundation's audit revealed that he'd blocked over $4 million in grants to minority artists over 15 years, using his board position to funnel money toward programs that benefited his social circle instead. Banks that had financed his projects started calling in loans, spooked by the criminal investigation and the reputational damage. His son's defection particularly stung. James gave a series of interviews explaining his decision to break with his father, describing what he'd witnessed growing up in a household where cruelty was normalized and power was measured by how thoroughly you could dominate others. He donated $1 million to the Lena Brooks Resilience Fund, matching it with another $1 million for legal defense funds supporting workers' rights organizations. Victoria Vanderholt filed for divorce and released a statement that managed to be both self-serving and damning. She acknowledged that she'd enabled her husband's behavior through decades of looking the other way, choosing comfort over conscience. She pledged half her settlement to victims' funds and offered to testify about what she'd witnessed during their marriage. It was a carefully calculated move to protect herself, but it was also genuinely damaging to Marcus's defense. The criminal investigation expanded. Federal authorities joined the Manhattan DA, looking into interstate fraud and potential money laundering. The Hotel Workers Union filed a massive class action lawsuit seeking back wages and damages for thousands of employees across Vanderholt's properties. The Department of Labor opened its own investigation into systematic violations of workplace safety regulations. Lena watched it all with a mixture of satisfaction and exhaustion. This was what she'd wanted: accountability, justice, proof that speaking up mattered. But it was also overwhelming, the scale of destruction radiating out from that one moment on the ballroom floor. She'd danced, and now an empire was falling. Second thoughts? Maestro Chen asked during one of their regular check-ins. They were meeting at a cafe in Brooklyn, away from the media circus that followed Lena everywhere in Manhattan. Not about speaking up, Lena said, but I wonder sometimes about the cost. Victoria was right that this affects people beyond Vanderholt. Workers losing jobs because his companies are failing, investors losing money. His daughter, did you know he has a daughter? She's 16, and now her father is a national symbol of toxic masculinity and abuse. That's not her fault. No, it's not. It's his fault. He created this situation through decades of choices. Chen stirred her coffee thoughtfully. You didn't destroy his empire, Lena. You just exposed the rot that was always there. The instability, the exploitation, the unsustainable business model built on treating people as disposable. That was going to collapse eventually. You just accelerated the timeline. Tell that to the housekeepers who are unemployed now. The foundation is working with the union to place displaced workers in other properties, and several of Vanderholt's competitors have announced their hiring with better wages and conditions, specifically to distance themselves from his practices. Chen leaned forward. Change is messy, justice is messy, but that doesn't mean it's not worth pursuing. Lena knew Chen was right, knew that systematic problems required systematic solutions, that breaking corrupt systems meant temporary chaos before better structures could emerge. But knowing it intellectually didn't make living through it emotionally easier. Her phone buzzed. Amanda Reeves. Lena, I have news. Vanderholt's lawyers just announced he's entering a plea deal with the DA's office, pleading guilty to multiple counts of fraud and labor violations in exchange for reduced charges and a lighter sentence. Lena's breath caught. He's admitting guilt? Publicly, on record. His legal team knows the evidence is overwhelming and that a trial would expose even more damage. The plea deal includes restitution to victims, dissolution of several business entities, and permanent prohibition from holding certain corporate positions, plus jail time, probably 18 months to 3 years, depending on the judge. 3 years. After decades of abuse, after hundreds of victims, after systematic exploitation of everyone he had power over, 3 years felt simultaneously like victory and like nowhere near enough. What about civil suits? Lena asked. Those proceed separately. The criminal conviction will make them easier to win, but each victim still has to pursue their own case. Reeves paused. Your lawsuit against him for harassment and emotional distress. His lawyers are apparently preparing settlement offers for you and several other high-profile victims. They want to close out liabilities before sentencing. I'm not interested in settling, I figured. But Lena, you should know, the legal fees for continuing to trial are going to be substantial. Even with the foundation's support and James's help, you're looking at significant costs and time investment. A settlement would give you money now and let you move forward with your life. Lena thought about this. Thought about the thumb drive full of evidence that had helped crack open the investigation. Thought about Derek Mills, who'd lost his job and faced his own legal jeopardy for breaking his NDA. Thought about all the people who'd found courage to speak up because she'd spoken first. I want my day in court, she said. I want a jury to hear what he did, to put a value on the harm, to make it officially part of the record. Not a quiet settlement with an NDA, a public verdict. That's brave. That's also exhausting and re-traumatizing and uncertain. I know, but I've spent 5 years being quiet, being invisible, letting the world forget I existed because it was easier than fighting to be seen. Lena's voice strengthened. I'm done with easy. I want justice that means something. The trial began 4 months later. Marcus Vanderholt appeared in court looking diminished, his usual arrogance replaced by something that might have been fear or might have been calculation. His lawyers mounted a vigorous defense, arguing that Lena was a willing participant in a social interaction that she'd later reframed as victimization, that her emotional distress claims were exaggerated, that she was seeking money she didn't deserve. Lena sat through days of testimony, watching her life dissected for a jury. They brought in her former physical therapist to discuss her injuries, her old therapist to talk about depression and trauma following the accident, colleagues from the Ashford who described her as reliable and professional, and finally, Lena herself, taking the stand to describe what it felt like to be targeted for humiliation, to lose her job for refusing to accept abuse, to have her rebuilt life shattered because a powerful man needed entertainment. Marcus Vanderholt's lawyers tried to rattle her during cross-examination, suggesting she'd provoked the confrontation deliberately, that accepting the dance challenge proved she wasn't actually distressed, that her subsequent advocacy work showed she'd benefited professionally from the incident. Isn't it true, Ms. Brooks, the defense attorney said with a smirk, that you're now making money from speaking engagements and media appearances related to this case? That you've financially profited from painting yourself as a victim? Lena met his eyes calmly. I've accepted speaking fees for sharing my story at conferences and events. Yes, because telling the truth about what happened to me costs money. Legal fees, security costs, lost wages from my job that Mr. Vanderholt got me fired from. If survivors speaking publicly about abuse results in some compensation for the time and emotional labor involved, that's not profiting from victimization. That's being paid for work. Work that wouldn't exist if you hadn't deliberately antagonized my client. Work that wouldn't exist if your client hadn't chosen to publicly humiliate someone he considered beneath him. I didn't create this situation. I just refused to disappear quietly when he tried to destroy me for resisting. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the forewoman read the verdict with a clear, steady voice. Liable on all counts. Compensatory damages, $500,000 for lost wages, medical expenses, and economic harm. Punitive damages, $15 million, designed to punish egregious conduct and deter future behavior. The courtroom erupted. Vanderholt's face went white. His lawyers immediately began talking about appeals. But Lena just sat there, feeling the weight of vindication settle over her like a blanket. $15 million. She'd never see most of it. Vanderholt's assets were tied up in criminal restitution and other lawsuits, and bankruptcy proceedings would take years to resolve. But the number mattered. The public declaration that what he'd done warranted this level of punishment mattered. The precedent for other victims mattered. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. Supporters holding signs, news crews waiting for statements, other Vanderholt victims who'd attended the trial to watch justice finally catch up with a man who'd evaded it for decades. Lena stood at the microphone, looking out at all those faces. This verdict isn't just about me, she said. It's about every person who's been told to know their place, every worker who's been abused by someone with power, every victim who's been silenced by money and lawyers and the machinery designed to protect wealth at the expense of dignity. She paused, gathering her thoughts. 5 years ago, I lost my career in an accident, lost my identity, my future, everything I'd built. I spent those years learning to survive, learning to be invisible, learning to accept less because I thought I had no choice. But Marcus Vanderholt taught me something important when he tried to humiliate me. He taught me that visibility is dangerous for people like him, that speaking up threatens systems built on silence, that refusing to disappear is its own kind of power. Her voice grew stronger. To everyone watching who's facing their own Marcus Vanderholt, whether that's an abusive boss, a corrupt institution, or just a system that treats you as disposable, know that speaking up is terrifying. It costs something. It might cost everything, but silence costs something too. It costs your dignity, your sense of self, your belief that justice is possible. Lena looked directly at the cameras. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who got tired of being afraid. And if my story helps even one person find the courage to stand up, to speak out, to refuse to be broken, then every moment of this fight was worth it. The questions came rapid fire after that, But Lena had said what she needed to say. She let her lawyers handle the media while she slipped away to where James and Maestro Chen were waiting with Marcus Washington. "You did it," James said simply. "You actually did it." "We did it," Lena corrected. "Every person who came forward, who testified, who refused to stay silent. This was collective action, not individual heroism." Over the following months, the systems Marcus Vanderholt had corrupted began to reform. The Hotel Workers Union won significant victories in contract negotiations, pointing to the trial as evidence of what happened when workers lacked protection. 3 major hotel chains implemented new harassment reporting procedures and independent oversight. The Metropolitan Arts Foundation restructured its grant process to prevent individual board members from having veto power over funding decisions. Derek Mills found work with a nonprofit advocating for whistleblower protections, using his experience to help others navigate the risks of exposing corruption. Victoria Vanderholt donated a significant portion of her divorce settlement to organizations supporting domestic violence survivors and workers' rights groups. Even she seemed to understand that accountability required more than just distancing herself from her ex-husband's crimes. Marcus Vanderholt served 26 months in a minimum security federal prison. When he was released, he found a world that had moved on without him. His properties had been sold to pay restitution and settlements. His board positions were gone. His social circle had evaporated. He was 64 years old and starting over with nothing but the notoriety of being the billionaire brought down by a housekeeper he'd tried to humiliate. Lena heard about his release but felt nothing. No triumph, no vindication, no sense of victory. He was irrelevant to her now, a chapter closed. She'd spent too much energy fighting him to waste more thinking about him once he was neutralized. She had better things to focus on. The Lena Brooks Resilience Fund had grown beyond anyone's expectations, funded by the civil settlement and donations from people inspired by her story. In its first year, it provided support to 47 dancers facing career-ending injuries or circumstances, paying for medical care, retraining programs, educational opportunities, and simply ensuring that losing the ability to dance didn't mean losing the ability to survive. Lena split her time between administrative work for the fund and teaching at a community arts center in the Bronx. Her body couldn't handle professional-level dancing anymore, but she could teach children the basics, could share her knowledge, could help the next generation develop skills that might open doors for them the way they'd once opened doors for her. The students at the center weren't the privileged children of Manhattan who could afford elite ballet schools and private lessons. They were kids from working families, immigrants learning English, teenagers looking for something to do after school besides getting into trouble. Lena taught them that dance wasn't about perfection or achieving some impossible standard. It was about expression, about claiming space in a world that often tried to make them invisible, about finding strength in their own bodies. One afternoon, working with a 13-year-old girl named Maria who reminded Lena painfully of her younger self, she demonstrated a turn sequence. Her left leg protested, the old injuries making themselves known, but she pushed through because Maria needed to see it done correctly. "Miss Lana," Maria asked afterward, "does it still hurt? From when you fell?" "Every day," Lena said honestly. "Some days worse than others. But pain is just information. It tells me what my body needs, what I can push through, and what I need to respect." "Do you wish you could still dance like you used to, like in those videos online?" Lena considered this. A year ago, even 6 months ago, she might have said yes without hesitation. Might have admitted that she mourned her lost career every day, that teaching was a consolation prize for the life she'd really wanted. But standing in this community center, watching Maria and the other students work through combinations with the kind of determined focus that meant dance mattered to them, Lena realized her answer had changed. "I miss performing sometimes," she said, "miss the stage and the lights and the feeling of everything clicking perfectly. But what I'm doing now, helping dancers like you develop your skills, making sure that talent isn't wasted because someone can't afford lessons or doesn't have connections, this matters differently. This creates ripples that extend beyond my own career." She smiled at Maria. "I got to dance professionally for 7 years. That was a gift not everyone gets. Now I get to help others have their own gifts. That's worth something too." 6 months after Vanderholt's release from prison, Lena received an unexpected letter. It was from him, written on plain paper in uncertain handwriting that suggested either a shaking hand or genuine emotion. The letter was short. It didn't ask for forgiveness or offer excuses. It simply acknowledged that what he'd done to her and countless others was wrong, that he'd spent his life believing power meant the right to dominate, and that losing everything had forced him to confront what he'd become. He didn't expect her to respond or care. He just wanted her to know that she'd been right to fight back, that accountability had been necessary, even though he'd fought it every step of the way. Lena read it twice, then filed it away without responding. She didn't owe him closure or forgiveness. His journey toward understanding the harm he'd caused was his responsibility, not her burden to ease. What she did do was write a different letter, to the young server who'd spilled a drink that night at the gala, whose near firing had prompted Lena to step forward in the first place. The girl's name was Sophie Chen, and Lena had tracked her down through the hotel's former employee network. The letter thanked Sophie for her unintentional role in everything that followed, explained that witnessing her humiliation had been the catalyst that made staying silent impossible, offered her a scholarship through the Resilience Fund to pursue whatever dreams she had, whether in hospitality or elsewhere. Sophie responded with a tearful phone call, explaining that she'd left hotel work after that night, traumatized by Vanderholt's cruelty. She was studying social work now, wanting to help others who faced the kind of powerlessness she'd experienced. The scholarship would cover her tuition and let her focus on school instead of juggling multiple jobs. "You changed my life," Sophie said, not just by standing up to him, but by showing me that how people treat you when they have power over you says everything about them and nothing about your worth. Lena felt something unlock in her chest. This was why the fight had mattered, not the verdict or the money or the media attention. This, the ripple effects of refusing to accept abuse, the example set for others, the permission granted to believe that dignity wasn't negotiable. 2 years after the trial, the Metropolitan Arts Foundation hosted a gala, celebrating the Resilience Fund's accomplishments. Lena attended reluctantly, still uncomfortable with being celebrated, preferring the quiet work of teaching and administration to public recognition. But Maestro Chen had insisted, and as Lena entered the ballroom, the same ballroom where everything had started, she understood why. The room was filled with dancers the fund had supported, performers who'd recovered from injuries with the help of medical grants, students who'd attended summer intensives funded by scholarships, teachers who'd received support to create programs in underserved communities. All of them there because one woman had refused to be humiliated quietly, had fought back against a system designed to crush resistance. James Vanderholt was there too, no longer estranged from his family, but maintaining firm boundaries about what behavior he'd accept from his father. He'd used his inheritance to fund worker advocacy organizations and had become a vocal supporter of corporate accountability reforms. He caught Lena's eye across the room and raised his glass in acknowledgement. The evening included performances by fund recipients, each one showcasing different styles and approaches to dance: classical ballet, contemporary, hip-hop, traditional cultural dances from a dozen different countries. It was beautiful and chaotic, and nothing like the rigid perfectionism of Lena's ABT days. It was better. When Maestro Chen called Lena to the stage for recognition, she walked up feeling the familiar ache in her leg, the permanent reminder of the fall that had ended her performing career. But she walked without shame, without regret, without wishing things had been different. 2 years ago, Chen said to the assembled crowd, Lena Brooks did something extraordinary. She refused to accept humiliation as the price of survival. She stood up to someone who'd never faced consequences for cruelty. And in doing so, she started a movement that's transformed how we think about power, accountability, and who deserves dignity in this world. The applause was warm, genuine. Lena looked out at all those faces and saw not just support for her personally, but commitment to the principles her fight had represented. When Chen handed her the microphone, Lena spoke from the heart. "I want to thank everyone who supported this work, everyone who donated, who shared stories, who found courage to speak up. But I especially want to thank the people who benefited from the Resilience Fund. You're the reason this matters. You're proof that systematic change is possible, that breaking corrupt systems creates space for something better." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "When I was cleaning hotel rooms, I was invisible to most people. just furniture that moved and emptied trash and restocked towels. And I'm not going to pretend that invisibility didn't hurt, didn't make me feel less than human sometimes, but it also taught me something important. Lena looked out at the crowd, making eye contact with Sophie Chen, with Derek Mills, with Marcus Washington, with all the other people who'd been invisible themselves and had found ways to matter anyway. It taught me that the work society doesn't value is still valuable. That the people the powerful dismiss still have power. That invisibility can be a choice, a strategic retreat, a way of surviving until you're ready to be seen. And when you choose to step into visibility, when you claim space you've been denied, that act of defiance changes everything. Her voice grew stronger. So, to everyone out there who feels invisible, who's told to know their place, who's tired of being treated as disposable, know that you matter. Your dignity matters. Your resistance matters. And sometimes one moment of refusing to accept the unacceptable can shift the whole world. The applause this time was thunderous, sustained. Lena stood in it, let it wash over her, and felt the final piece of something click into place. She'd spent 5 years mourning who she'd been, grieving the career she'd lost. But standing here now, looking at everything that had emerged from her choice to fight back, she realized she'd become someone different. Someone better, maybe. Certainly someone more complete. She was no longer just Lena Brooks, the fallen dancer. She was Lena Brooks, who'd survived destruction twice and had built something meaningful from the wreckage both times. Who'd proven that excellence was its own answer to cruelty, that courage could be contagious, that one person's refusal to be broken could crack open systems that seemed impenetrable. After the gala, after the speeches and performances and celebrations, Lena returned to her apartment in Washington Heights. It was bigger now, 2 bedrooms instead of a studio, space for a proper home office and a dedicated area for physical therapy. But she'd kept the bar, the same one she'd installed in her old place, the one she used for stretches when the pain got bad. She stood at it now, going through the familiar sequence of movements, feeling her body respond with the memory of 1,000 training sessions. She couldn't perform anymore, couldn't push through the damage to achieve professional standards, but she could still move, could still feel music in her bones, could still experience the joy of dance, even in limited form. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. 3 years after the trial, Marcus Vanderholt died of a heart attack. The news made headlines for a day, obituaries recounting his rise and fall, his empire and its destruction. Some remembered him as a brilliant businessman brought down by changing social standards. Others remembered him as a cautionary tale about unchecked power and the cost of cruelty. Lena barely noticed. She was too busy preparing for a showcase featuring students from 5 different community centers the Resilience Fund had partnered with. Too focused on helping a young dancer recover from ankle surgery. Too engaged with the work of building systems that supported artists instead of exploiting them. She'd won her war against Marcus Vanderholt. But more importantly, she'd won something bigger. The right to define herself on her own terms, the freedom to create meaning from trauma, the power to transform her pain into purpose. On the night of the showcase, watching dozens of young dancers perform for crowds that included their families and communities, Lena felt a peace she'd never experienced on any professional stage. This wasn't about perfection or achievement or proving anything to anyone. This was about joy, about expression, about the fundamental human need to move and create and claim space in the world. This was what she'd been searching for all along, even when she didn't know it. And somewhere in that audience, Sophie Chen sat with her social work textbooks. Maria practiced her turns in the wings, and a dozen other young people carried forward the lesson Lena had taught them through her refusal to be broken. Excellence, they'd learned, wasn't about never falling. It was about choosing to stand back up, about refusing to let anyone, no matter how powerful, how wealthy, how connected, convince you that you deserve to stay down. It was about dancing anyway, in whatever form your body allowed, for whatever audience would listen, with whatever strength you had left. It was about remembering that survival itself was victory, and everything built beyond survival was grace. And grace, Lena had discovered, was the truest form of power there was.